This page is a cracker. Right on the cover we've got that Turok 2 game. The dinosaur beastie looks properly scary, mouth wide open and claws out. They are really pushing the better than GoldenEye angle, aren't they? Everyone was obsessed with GoldenEye back then, so that's a bold claim for Turok 2. Warrington? It's reviewing Turok 2 in this issue, which was a big deal at the time. Underneath that, they're teasing Perfect Dark, saying new shots and calling it Rare's Bond beater. Bit cheeky comparing it to GoldenEye again, but we all knew Perfect Dark was meant to be the next big thing from Rare after GoldenEye. Then in bright yellow they've got Zelda and Banjo, promising the UK release date for Zelda, and something about winning cash and new cheats for Banjo. Zelda, obviously Ocarina of Time, everyone was desperate for any news on that. Banjo-Kazooie was already out and great fun, so cheats were always welcome. Down at the bottom there's little screenshots for Jet Force Gemini and V-Rally 64, mentioning page numbers for those reviews. Jet Force Gemini was another one from Rare, so they were really dominating the N64 at this point. V-Rally 64 seemed alright, but racing games were 10 a penny back then. Says it's issue 21, November 1998, and costs £2.95, which was probably a bit steep for a magazine, but you know, it was the official N64 mag. Yeah, good cover this one, all the big hitters featured. This page from the magazine, right, it's got a big welcome to N64 Magazine splashed across the top in a kind of 3D blocky font. Seems like an intro page for a new issue. They're boasting about being Britain's biggest and best-selling N64 mag, which, well, back then they probably were. They're making a big deal about their Star Game Award and how they actually play games properly before giving out top marks, which is fair enough, you'd hope so, wouldn't you? They're also banging on about being independent from Nintendo so they can give honest reviews, even if a game is awful. Bit dramatic, but okay. And because they're independent, they get to review Japanese and American games as soon as they're out, letting us know what's worth looking forward to. The main focus is N64 games that we can actually buy in the UK, no messing about with import-only stuff that you can't get your hands on. They mention they don't pad out the magazine with loads of stuff about games only the Japanese can play, which is probably a dig at other mags at the time. They've got correspondents in Europe, Japan and America apparently, getting all the first-hand news, and they're saying they don't copy rumors off the internet. Remember the internet back then? Still quite new and a bit Wild West. They're saying they're written by experienced Nintendo fans and cramming each page with useful information and advice. Right then. Then there's a bit with a bloke looking stressed with his hands on his head, and some colourful text next to it asking, what goes whoosh EAAAAAAOO WWWEAAAARRRR gurgle splosh kaboom. Bit over the top. Turns out it's about Turok 2, Seeds of Evil. They're calling it the Cerebral Bore. Sounds a bit pretentious, doesn't it? But they are saying it's a masterpiece of simple, satisfying violence, and you can shoot a football-sized hole straight through its middle. Very subtle. Apparently it looks like a high-end PC with a graphics card. Bit much. It was good looking for the time on the N64, I suppose. They're saying it's the first review of the game to appear in any Nintendo magazine anywhere in the world. Big claim. Then there's a section about a free Zelda console sticker kit. Exclusive Zelda console sticker kit. Yeah, those were the days, sticking those things onto your console. It's for Zelda Ocarina of Time. Naturally, that was the big game everyone was waiting for, wasn't it? They say it's designed to decorate your console in preparation for the great day itself. Bit dramatic again. James Ashton is named as the editor at the bottom of that column. Below that, there's instructions on how to use your exclusive Zelda console sticker kit, telling you to peel off sections at a time and smooth them down to avoid bubbles. Simple, eh? And at the very bottom it says November 1998 and N64 3. Looks like issue number 3 then, and it's from November 98. Feels like ages ago now. This page is the contents page for issue 21 of N64 Magazine from November 1998, back when N64 was king. Right at the top, in big red letters, it screams contents. We've got the usual sections you'd expect. First up is Planet 64, which is the news bit, starting on page 16. Sounds like it's covering expansion packs, game prices, competitions, and something called moronic cleaners. No idea what that's about, maybe some sort of cleaning product for your console. Then there's N64 Arena starting on page 50, with the Union Jack flag, so that's the UK reviews section. They've reviewed and completed UK releases. The games in there are Turok 2, Seeds of Evil, which was a big deal at the time. Everyone was hyped for that dinosaur hunter. Gek 64, Enter the Gecko, that wisecracking gecko platformer. Glover, which was a bit odd with the glove as the main character. Bomberman Hero, another Bomberman game. They were always pretty solid. YLA Country Club, a golf game. And 1080 Snowboarding, Nintendo's snowboarder. Coming soon is on page 20, teasing forthcoming N64 games. There are some screenshots there. Looks like a football game, could be Ice 98 or something, and then a dark, moody-looking dungeon crawler. Might be Turok 2 again, or Shadows of the Empire perhaps, can't quite tell. Then you have regulars, listed down the side, standard stuff, information station for news and charts, tips extra for game hints, N64 shopper for adverts naturally, Club 64, subscriptions to make sure you don't miss an issue, back issues if you did miss one, a directory probably for contacts and stuff, and finally, N64 Magazine issue 22, a preview of what's in the next mag. At the bottom right, Import Arena starts on page 80, with the Japanese and American flags, covering imported games. They mention Trump World, which sounds a bit weird, described as a Japanese card game. They say we nod off, which is probably their way of saying it's not very exciting. So pretty standard issue contents page for the time, showcasing the big N64 games coming out for Christmas '98. This page of the mag is all about future games coming to the N64, and some tips on games already out. Right at the top they're teasing future look, with a bunch of big titles. There's Perfect Dark, Rare's new shooter after GoldenEye, saying it's their Ace sequel. Yeah, we were all waiting for that one. Then Jet Force Gemini, with dogs, guns and all new pics, seemed a bit quirky from what I remember. Rogue Squadron is there too, proper Star Wars on the N64, which was always going to be good. And Body Harvest, saying one final playtest, which sounds like they weren't too impressed then. Then there's a how-to section, with tips for becoming a champ at IS 98, that football game. And a bit about being the best at Banjo-Kazooie, must be some kind of competition. Legend of Zelda is in there with all new pictures, and a chance to win PAL copies, ooh, exciting stuff. And an exclusive interview with Howard Lincoln from Nintendo, a special interrogation, sounds a bit dramatic. Down the bottom they've got, the 10 strangest things in video games, saying, like the X-Files, so probably a bit silly. And then the big one on the right, is Turok 2, saying, is it better than GoldenEye? Bit of a bold claim that. N64 Mag getting the first reveal of it, exclusive of course. And finally, a special investigation into V-Rally 98, saying it's fast, furious and fantastic. Trying to big it up a bit, weren't they? Seems like a packed issue, lot of previews to get you hyped for Christmas. This page is all about a sneak peek at some upcoming N64 games, proper exciting stuff back then. It's titled Future Look, so you know it's the games to keep an eye out for. Top billing goes to Perfect Dark, naturally. They're calling it exclusive new shots of GoldenEye 2. Bit cheeky, but you knew what they meant. Everyone was desperate for the next GoldenEye, weren't they? They've got a few screenshots. One looks like a hoverbike bit, shooting guards in a corridor. Classic stuff. Another looks like that laser mist bit from Alien, which is a bit ominous. They warn you not to get too close to that thing on the floor. Then there's one saying the detail is miles ahead of GoldenEye, and that the energy meter is different now. Good to know, eh? Below Perfect Dark, there's mentions of Jet Force Gemini, saying it's coming on in leaps and bounds. Always sounded a bit daft, that phrase, but hey, it's Jet Force Gemini. Then Rogue Squadron, which they call exclusive shots of LucasArts' second N64 game. Yeah, because Shadows of the Empire wasn't quite enough Star Wars for us, was it? And finally, Body Harvest, described as an almost complete alien blaster. Sounds like it's getting there then. Down the bottom there's a bit saying want more new games, and telling you to check out the coming soon section on page 20 in Planet 64. Always trying to get you to read more, weren't they? And right at the bottom there's the usual N64 Magazine logo and issue number. Oh, and a little box for Perfect Dark with the Rare logo, release date of summer '99 in the UK and US, and new pics. So yeah, pretty standard hype page really, all about getting us excited for what was coming next on the N64. This page is having a look at Perfect Dark, which everyone was pretty hyped about back then, wasn't they? They're saying it's the proper follow-up to GoldenEye on the N64, even though James Bond might have had his day on the console apparently. Runs on a fancied-up GoldenEye engine apparently, but they reckon it's bigger and more diverse, with bits that look a bit Blade Runner-y in the city scenes. They've got screenshots of Joanna Dark, who looks like she's thinking about her next move in a cutscene, and some bits that look like a lab, a grim futuristic street, and even some sort of underground installation, alien or Datadyne made, who knows. They reckon there will be no less than 20 levels, cheeky, and even hoverbikes and underwater bits. Sounds like you might need one of those RAM expansion packs to run it properly though. Don't expect to see it till well into next year either. Typical gaming magazines getting everyone excited ages before you can actually play it, eh? This page is a preview of Perfect Dark. It seems to be a game causing a bit of a stir even at this early stage back then. It's being touted as a must-have for fans of the X-Files and Blade Runner, set in 2023, which seemed properly futuristic back in '98. Apparently you play as Joanna Dark, a covert operative investigating alien research at Datadyne Corporation. Sounds a bit conspiratorial. There are a couple of screenshots showing off the moody futuristic cityscapes they were going for, and Joanna sneaking around, looking very James Bond-esque, but with better graphics than GoldenEye, of course. They're making a point about Joanna being a different kind of action heroine to Lara Croft. Less surgically enhanced apparently, more of a practical sort. They even joke about her wearing a cocktail dress in one screenshot, wondering where she keeps her limpet mines. It does look a bit odd for espionage, doesn't it? The other bit, Blood and Guts, is about the violence. They're wondering if Rare will go down the super violent route like Turok 2, but reckon they'll probably keep it more like GoldenEye, more implied violence than outright gore, which was probably for the best back then, eh? They mention GoldenEye being disturbing because of its understated, clinical nature, which is a fair point. They reckon a bit of blood on the walls wouldn't go amiss though, a bit of a step up from Bond perhaps. Overall, it's looking like Perfect Dark could be something special, a proper step up from GoldenEye, and definitely one to watch out for. This page in N64 Magazine is previewing Perfect Dark, which everyone was proper excited about back then, especially after GoldenEye. So, Killing Machine section is all about the weapons. They're saying James Bond was a bit limited with realistic guns, but Joanna Dark's packing some proper futuristic kit. Apparently, there's a heat-seeking machine gun which sounds a bit mad, and you can blow holes in walls with limpet mines to find secret areas. They're also teasing Roswell-style aliens to fight, which sounds a bit daft but could be fun. Ryu. Then there's multiplayer, which they're keeping quiet about, but they reckon it'll be miles better than GoldenEye's deathmatches, which were already brilliant. They hint at loads more options, characters, weapons, even vehicles. Apparently there's a two-player co-op mode as well, which is a nice bonus. Typical Rare though, no comment, is all they'll officially say. Cheeky sods. Jaspath. Lastly, Sounds Fantastic is about the audio. If you had a fancy home cinema setup with Dolby Pro Logic, you could play Perfect Dark in surround sound. They're saying you'll be able to hear gunshots and enemies creeping up on you, which PC gamers have had for ages apparently. They reckon headphones are still the best way to play first-person shooters for proper immersion. Kawiya. There are some screenshots looking pretty decent. They even mention they look more like a 3DFX PC game than an N64 one, wondering if the RAM expansion is doing the trick. One screenshot caption mentions abducting an alien with a trolley, which is a bit bizarre. And another one points out you might hear enemy footsteps on the metal floors. Boo. Looks like more info is to be continued in the next issue. Typical magazine trick to get you to buy the next one, eh? Still, Perfect Dark was shaping up to be something special back then, wasn't it? This page is looking at Jet Force Gemini Rare's new shooter, and blimey it does look rather swish, doesn't it? They're saying here that the graphics are spot on, and you can see the little bits flying off the aliens when you blast them. Nice touch. Apparently you need to be careful with your jumps, and there's some sort of robot fella tagging along. Those electric beams look a bit nasty, mind you. The magazine is saying it's like a futuristic Banjo-Kazooie with guns, which sounds about right from the screenshots, platforming and exploring and all that. They reckon there's loads of secrets to find too. You can play as 3 different characters, Juno, Vela, and Lupus the dog, and they're even promising a 4-player deathmatch mode, and co-op as well. And they're really going on about how good Rare are at the moment, mentioning Perfect Dark as well, and 12 Tales, whatever that is, and how even Turok 2 from Acclaim is looking decent. They're saying it could be a very interesting end to 98 for the old N64, and you know what, they might be right. Still no release date for Gemini though, typical. This page in N64 Magazine from back in 98, it's all about Jet Force Gemini. Right in the middle of the page, big bold letters, you can't miss it, Jet Force Gemini, K9 Space Spectacular. Sounds a bit much, doesn't it? There are a couple of screenshots, one of some bloke in white armor blasting away at some alien fella, with some text boxes going on about shell casings and alien blood. Very dramatic. Another screenshot shows this dog character, Lupus. They're making a big deal about him being a playable dog with jet engines in his paws and missiles apparently. Sounds a bit bonkers even for Rare. They call it Dog Day Afternoon and say he's unique as a K9 character, which, well, I suppose so if you forget about games like, I don't know, but anyway, they're promising more about this new blaster from Rare in the next issue. Hopefully. Cheeky sods. It's all part of their future look section, so this is before the game came out. Just building up the hype as usual. Says it's from November 98, so Christmas was probably looming. Ah, simpler times. This page is all about Rogue Squadron on the N64. Looks like a preview. They're calling it Game for a Darth, which is a bit of alright, isn't it? Seems like they reckon it could be the best Star Wars blaster game yet. They are saying it's LucasArts' second stab at Star Wars on the N64, after Shadows of the Empire. They weren't too impressed with Shadows apparently, especially that Dash Rendar fella. calling him a shambling wreck and his lines a bit rubbish. They're much happier playing as Luke Skywalker in Rogue Squadron, saying he's more likable. Weren't. The screenshots look pretty good for the N64, showing off the sky at night looking all red and dramatic, and some speeders buzzing about. There's a bit about fighting TIE fighters over a city, and X-Wings looking nicely detailed, even with a bit of fog. They mentioned some grabs from a Nintendo show video, saying it's all higher resolution than before. One picture is from a cutscene on Tatooine, and another showing more action on Luke's home planet. They're saying it's based on the Rogue Squadron novels, which is a decent source to be fair. Apparently it's got loads of levels, and they've seen quite a bit of it at game shows, saying the size of the levels is incredible for the N64. They spotted Mos Eisley, Jabba's Palace, the Pit of Sarlacc, Beggar's Canyon and Luke's Place, so it sounds like it's packing in all the classic Star Wars locations. They even mentioned Tornado, another N64 game by the same co-developers, Factor 5, calling it a Turrican wannabe, and saying they're still waiting for screenshots of that one from Issue 1. Sounds like they're more excited about blasting TIE fighters in an X-Wing to be honest, and who can blame them? This page is all about Rogue Squadron on the N64, remember that one? Right, good Star Wars game that was. They're showing off the different ships you can fly, like the classic X-Double-Wing, the nippy A-Double-Wing, a V-Double-Wing, and even a speeder. Apparently the V-Double-Wing's capabilities are still a mystery at this point. Bit dramatic, innit? Gameplay sounds like your typical Star Wars fare, rescuing rebels, tackling locations from the films, like the Sarlacc Pit Grim Place that is. They're even mentioning missions based around Cloud City and Endor, and the reviewers having a laugh about nuking Ewoks. Bit harsh. Wedge Antilles and Dak are along for the ride as your wingmen, CPU controlled of course, no need to rope in your mates for this one. Yay. Visually, they're banging on about needing that 4MB expansion pack to get it looking its best, running at a fancy 640 by 480 resolution. Eye-gorgingly fine they reckon, bit much but fair enough, it probably looked pretty decent at the time. They're saying the music's not bad either, John Williams score and all that, you know the drill. It was slated for release in the UK in November 98, just in time for Christmas. They reckon it could be the best Star Wars game ever. Strong words, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Still, looked promising, didn't it? This page in N64 Magazine issue 21, they're previewing Gremlin's new game, Body Harvest. Seems like MA Design has been showing it off again, and they've had another go on the preview cart. It sounds like a proper ambitious beast this one, set across loads of different worlds. 5 of them apparently, and a massive landscape to boot. They're calling it a blaster, but with RPG bits and puzzles as well, which sounds like they're trying to cram everything in there. You play as Adam Drake, and you're trying to sort out these alien predators who've been giving humanity grief for ages. There's another survivor called Daisy who's supposed to be giving you advice, so at least you're not completely on your own. They reckon it's going to be hitting shops soon, and they're looking forward to reviewing it proper when it's finished. Looking at the screenshots, it's all a bit chunky polygons as you'd expect, for the N64. In one of them, there's some geezer indoors moaning about a rumpus outside, while all hell's breaking loose. Then you've got these big spider-like alien things, drone kings they're calling them, and it looks like you're driving around in a little van blasting them. One of the captions is about a drone king eating something unsavory, and another one mentions rainbow haze being some kind of alien shield in Java. Always with the cryptic clues in these previews, eh? It's slated for release in October in the US and November 20th over here in the UK. Hopefully it'll be a decent bit of monster blasting when it finally arrives. This page is a bit of a look at Body Harvest, coming soon to the N64. From what looks like a preview in the mag, they're going through some of the finer points of causing mayhem in the game. Top Massacres is the first section, and it sounds like the reviewer is having a right old time running over civilians in Greece with a fire engine. Bit naughty, but each to their own I suppose. They mention their best massacre involved 11 people, men, women and children. Bit dark humour, but alright. Then there's Top Vehicles, where they're banging on about how there are loads of vehicles dotted about that you can nick, and they act as body armour. Apparently the panzer tank in the Greek level is the best they've found so far, but there's more to discover. Hovercrafts get a mention for Java's swamps. Next up it's Top Weapons. Hidden weapons are the name of the game, and they list shotguns, rifles and machine guns, plus ammo and explosives. Tanks get another shout out as free weapons, which is handy. Why, finally, Top Chompings is about harvesting wave beams that drop down, and you've got to get to them before they munch on too many humans. Otherwise you get a mutant drone king. They reckon you can kill humans yourself to feed the chomp if you're feeling a bit evil. Sounds like a right laugh if you're into that sort of thing. It ends with, to be continued, and a note to look out for the Body Harvest review coming soon. So it's just a teaser really in the November 98 issue. Number 15 it seems to be. This page is about the N64's new RAM expansion pack, right? Seems like they're making a bit of a fuss about it, calling it a wondrous new invention from Nintendo bit much, isn't it? Anyway, apparently chucking this bit of kit into the console gives you more memory, going from 4 megs to 8 megs. They reckon this means games can have better screen resolution, which is always welcome, and more complex levels and textures. They're banging on about Turok 2. Seeds of Evil looking amazing with this expansion, showing off a screenshot that's supposedly 640 by 480 resolution. To be fair, it does look a bit sharper than the usual N64 fuzz. Rogue Squadron is also confirmed to work with it. Apparently before this, only some acclaimed games like Quarterback Club, All-Star Baseball, and WWF Warzone could do the standard 320 by 256 resolution, which was a bit pants really. The magazine mentions that Nintendo isn't bundling the Pazomate with the console, which is a bit cheeky, and they're selling it separately for $30 as an optional extra. They reckon most people who get Turok 2 will want to buy one. Seems like developers are starting to add hires modes to their games, which is good news. There's even a whisper about a GoldenEye special edition with hires, but they're saying it might just be rumors. The RAM expansion pack is coming out in the States on November 24th, just after Zelda, which they think is strangely enough. Right, as if Nintendo didn't plan that. On the side there, it lists the usual magazine staff. James Ashton is the editor, Will Overton the art editor, and so on. You know, the usual suspects putting the mag together back in '98. Issue 21. November 1998, so it's all about the Christmas run-up, and getting hyped for these shiny new games, and add-ons. This page from the magazine is all about good news for N64 owners, mainly about prices finally coming down. Remember when these cartridges were 60 quid? Madness. They're saying the days of that are gone, and about time too. My wallet was weeping. Apparently Nintendo are finally dropping prices on games like Wave Race, Yoshi's Story, Diddy Kong Racing, Mario Kart 64, and Pilot Wings 64 to under 40 quid, and even Blastcore and Mischief Makers are down to under 30, which is a bit better. They reckon this is gonna help the N64 do well for Christmas. They're even saying new premium games like F-Zero X and Turok 2 will be about 40 quid too. Treasure. Then there's a big slice of price section banging on about even more deals. There's a competition to win a game, which is nice. They've got lists of reduced games, things like Shadows of the Empire and Mario Kart 64, and new games like Zelda Ocarina of Time, obviously the big one everyone was waiting for, and Star Wars, Rogue Squadron, which sounded pretty cool at the time. They've also got a bit about Capcom setting up shop in London, which they're making out to be a massive deal. Good for them, I suppose. In the shortcuts bit, it sounds like Shigeru Miyamoto, the big cheese at Nintendo, couldn't even make it to some game show because he's stuck in Japan still working on Zelda, which is hardly a surprise. And lastly, there's a bit about the UK games industry doing well, calling Britain the games capital of Europe, which is always good to hear, makes you feel a bit patriotic, doesn't it? This page has a right good mix of bits and bobs. Typical N64 mag really. Portus. First up, there's a bit about Acclaim being chuffed as their WWF Warzone game is flying off the shelves, even shifting more copies than some of the older WCW games. Who'd have thought wrestling games would be so popular, eh? Then there's a mention of GT World Tour. Looks like they're trying to squeeze some extra graphical oomph out of the N64 without needing a RAM pack ag. Clever clogs. Hopefully Boss will give us a full screen mode, about time too. Oops, looks like they made a bit of a boo-boo last month, and got their wires crossed about who made some N64 bits and bobs. Turns out it was Sakar, not Nugent, who were behind the radios and cameras. Never mind, easy mistake. Pelsus. Oh dear, sounds like the N64 mag cleaners had a bit of a mishap, and chucked out loads of Quake competition entries. Bit of a schoolboy error that. If you were a winner in issue 20, they want you to get in touch, sharpish, ota. Over on the left, there's the fanzine farm, always good to see what the fans are cooking up. This time they've got Go! Multi-fanzine. Sounds like it's all about manga and Japanese games, that sort of thing. Then there's GZINE, which seems to be having a dig through summer leftovers, talking about PlayStation and Mario 64. A bit behind the times maybe. In the middle, Bond is still king. Seems GoldenEye got Game of the Year at ECTS, and Nintendo nabbed Publisher of the Year. No surprise there really, GoldenEye was brilliant. Rorsi. Finally, down at the bottom, it's all about the Datal Power RAM, a third-party RAM expansion pack. Apparently it's tiny and light, and does the same job as the official one, maybe for less dosh. They reckon it's a must for Turok 2 players, boosting the graphics and all that. Sounds alright if you're into that sort of thing. They gave it 88%, not bad going. This page is having a look back at the Virtual Boy, bless it. Remember that red and black headache machine? They're calling it Retro World, which is a bit of a laugh. as it wasn't exactly a classic back then either. They've reviewed a few games for it. First up is Waterworld, based on the film. Apparently it's a US-only release, and sounds like a bit of a generic 3D shooter, nothing special, gets a measly 41%. Then there's Space Squash, which they say is like 3D Pong. That gets a much better 69%. Reckon it's a decent two-player game. Liable. Next is VB Baseball, and the reviewer is wondering why Americans are so obsessed with sports games. Says sports games on the Virtual Boy are pointless, and this baseball one is no exception but still gives it a 53%. Finally, there's Virtual Fishing, which is apparently rare. They're not impressed, saying it's boring despite being about fishing. Bit bizarre for a 3D console, gets a 44%. They mentioned the Virtual Boy was uncomfortable, and you'd end up with a red ring around your face. Also, there were rumors of a shoulder harness, but it never appeared. Apparently, prices of Virtual Boy stuff are going up because of rumors about a missing game. And for cheapskates, there's a Hong Kong multicart, with loads of games and demos, but good luck finding one outside of Hong Kong. Apparently, looks like Jason Moore wrote this, and there's his address if you want to write him a letter, back when people did that sort of thing. This page is all about upcoming N64 games, looks like a preview section. The big headline is, Time 2, and it's all about Duke Nukem, 0 Hour. Remember Duke? The Dukester himself is back, but this time they've gone third person, which is a bit of a change from the usual run and gun style of the SNES days. They reckon he's off to Victorian London to unmask Jack the Ripper, which sounds a bit bonkers, doesn't it? But then again, it's Duke Nukem, so you expect the unexpected. Yo Harry. It says here it's being developed by Eurocom, who did that Mortal Kombat 4 conversion. Hopefully this Duke game is a bit better received. They're aiming for a Christmas release, but it sounds like they were still tweaking things when they played it. There are a few screenshots, one of Duke in an armory, and another in a pink-lit area, looking a bit puzzled. The reviewer makes a joke about Duke staring at his crosshair and being a muscular psycho. Cheeky. Ate. Then there's a list of other games that are supposed to be coming out this month. Let's see. Norrington's Nightmare Creatures, that was meant to be a bit spooky, wasn't it? Revolt, Chameleon Twist, Rayman 2, Shadowman, Wild Metal Country, NFL Blitz, NASCAR 99, Battle Tanks, Puma Street Soccer, Lego Racers, and NFL Quarterback Club 99. Blimey, that's a lot. A real mixed bag there, some platformers, some sports games, and some action titles. Looks like there's plenty to keep N64 owners busy. They seem quite impressed with Duke Nukem 0 Hour, reckons it looks better than his first game, which, well, wasn't exactly a looker, was it? Anyway, fingers crossed this Duke game turns out alright. This page in N64 Magazine is having a look at Nightmare Creatures. Seems like Activision are bringing this one to the N64. It's set in Victorian London, and it's all fog and zombies, which is always a good starting point, isn't it? They're calling it a 3D zombie slasher, which sounds about right from the screenshots. There's Father Ignatius, looking a bit like a vampire hunter, and Nadia, who's handy with martial arts. Apparently her low-cut tops help with movement, which is a bit of a cheeky comment. Looks like you'll be hacking and slashing your way through loads of monsters. They mention 20-odd types of hellspawn, so plenty to keep you busy. They are saying it's converted from the PlayStation, and they're promising it'll be just as bloody on the N64. They mention body parts and gallons of blood, so it sounds like they're not holding back. Gameplay-wise, it sounds like you explore and fight, and there's an adrenaline meter that runs down, so you need to keep on your toes. They reckon there are special weapons like pistols and explosives lying around, and even a rumor about playing as one of the monsters, which would be a laugh. It's looking like it could be a decent addition to the N64's import scene, coming out around Halloween in the States. Shame there's no firm date for a UK release yet, which is typical, isn't it? They always keep us waiting. This page is about a new racing game for the N64 called Revolt. Looks like they're getting a lot of racing games for the old 64, aren't they? This one's from Twycross, who are meant to be a decent developer, so that's promising. It's all about racing toy cars, which reminds me a bit of Micro Machines. But they also mention Scars, that Ubisoft game, and even V-Rally for the physics. Ambitious. The article says these toy cars have gained minds of their own due to a computer glitch. Bit daft if you ask me. But whatever, it's a racer. They mention you'll be racing around toy shops, museums, parks, and city streets, so plenty of variety there then. The screenshots do look quite nice, even if they are from a fancy PC, and not the N64. The magazine admits that much. They're hoping the N64 version will still look decent, especially if Acclaim use the RAM pack, which is fair enough. We all know how blurry N64 games can get. One of the captions even jokes about ripping the arms off a teddy bear in the game. Bit cheeky. Release date is pegged for early '99, so we'll have to wait a bit to see if it lives up to the hype. Not getting my hopes up too much just yet, mind you. This page in Planet 64 Mag is having a look at Chameleon Twist. Right, chameleon with a tongue, licking things, got it. They're saying they were a bit surprised Ocean picked it up for the UK, thinking it was a bit kiddie, and maybe the market wasn't huge for that sort of thing back then, especially with Banjo-Kazooie being all the rage and appealing to everyone. But Chameleon is back apparently, tongue and all, in this updated version. They're saying this time, your chameleon hero has a natty red backpack and a parachute. Which sounds helpful, I suppose. But the main thing is still that massive tongue, a bit like Yoshi's, which you can shoot out to grab onto things and catapult yourself around. Sounds like sticky tongue-based platforming action. The game's got loads of worlds. Toyland, Music World, Ice World, Odoland, Arabia Land, and even a sky bit. They reckon it's pretty similar to the original gameplay-wise, but with better graphics, which is always a plus. The screenshots show a bit of what they mean, looking a bit sharper than what we were used to. One picture says there will be plenty of places to explore, and things to lick. Charming. Another one shows rolling barrels, always a platform game staple. Spelling danger apparently. And another one mentions enemies that look a bit solid. Charming. Apparently they played a near-finished version of Chameleon Twist 2. They reckon the original scored 70% in issue 10, which isn't bad. They're a bit miffed that the multiplayer battle mode seems to be missing, saying it was the best bit of the first game. Sunsoft, the developers, seem to be pushing it as a single-player experience. They're hoping the battle mode will be back by the time it comes out in Japan. UK release should be next year if they can find someone to publish it over here. Fingers crossed, I suppose, if you're desperate for some tongue action platforming. This page reviewing Rayman 2, eh? Armless fun they're calling it, bit cheeky. Right then, so it's Rayman back again, this time it seems on the N64. They're saying the original never made it to this console back in '95. Apparently even back then it was getting decent reviews on the other formats, the PlayStation and Saturn and that. For those of us who remember the first one, this is the sequel. They reckon Rayman 2 keeps the slick movement and sprawling levels from the first game, and that it's still a bit of a challenge. They mention one part that sounds a right pain with platforms, cargo nets, and using his helicopter ears to float about while a giant airship chases you. Sounds like a right old mess. They say even the director had to use a cheat code to get through it. Blimey. Painter. They say it might need a bit of tweaking if mere mortals are going to finish it. Still, they think it's good fun to play, comparing it to platformers like Earthworm Jim 3D and Banjo-Kazooie in terms of exploration. Apparently you can wander around underwater levels, which they think look groovy and striking. Graphically, it's one of the best platformers, with varied environments and only a bit of fogging. They think Rayman himself is cute enough, but maybe a bit freakish, with no arms and legs. They don't seem too bothered by it though, saying they can put up with the occasional worry. They're looking forward to it arriving for Christmas. There's a few little captions next to the screenshots. Bit of humor, I suppose. The fire seems to have burned Ray's body off. Boing! Take to the skies, limbless freak style. You know, typical magazine banter. Looks alright, I suppose. Could be a laugh over the Christmas break if you're stuck indoors. This page is looking at a couple of upcoming games for the N64. First up is Shadow Man. They're calling it shock horror. It seems like they're quite impressed with the visuals, saying it's looking better than the PC original, which is a bold claim back then. They're banging on about realistic character faces, and how the expansion pack will make it look even better, running at a whopping 640 by 480. Fancy that? They reckon the interiors look like Quake, but better, obviously. Cheeky. There's a screenshot of some dodgy-looking bloke, apparently that's Mr. Leroy's handiwork, and they are saying it's very dark and scary. Well, it's called Shadow Man, in it. Darry. Then there's Wild Metal Country, which they've titled Tanked Up. This one's from Gremlin, and it's a tank game, obviously. They say it's got 27 stages and multiplayer, and the tanks behave like animals, birds, rhinos and hyenas apparently. Sounds a bit bonkers, to be honest. They are saying not to expect pretty pictures, it's all about the gameplay, and that they are still working on the N64 version, but if it's anything like the PC one it could be good. Apparently the red dots in the screenshots will be smoke trails in the final game, which is a nice touch, I suppose. This page is all about getting stuck into some proper games, right in the thick of it. We've got two titles being showcased in the Played It section. First up is NFL Blitz. It's from Midway, coming in at a hefty 96 megs. Looks like a two-player job, and it was out in the US but not here yet at the time. The reviewer reckons it's like American football, in the style of Wayne Gretzky hockey, which sounds about right for that arcadey feel we were used to. Apparently it's all about fast-paced action, not bogged down in realism, which is probably a good thing. They mentioned 7 players aside and only 30 yards for a first down. Sounds like chaos. They even say fouling and cheating are encouraged, and stamping on heads after a sack is a laugh. Nice. There's a screenshot of a touchdown, and some on-screen hints popping up, which is handy for us simpletons. They reckon it's a right laugh if a bit painful sometimes. Then we're on to Boys Racer. Well, it's NASCAR, 99 actually. This one's from EA. Smaller, at 64 megs. And a single-player job. Also out in the US but not here yet. Apparently it's trying to capture the spirit of Days of Thunder. Bit of a blast from the past, that film, eh? They say it's a simulation kind of racer, with handling like GT64, which was decent enough. The review's a bit lukewarm. Says they didn't have much time with it, but it seems alright. More interesting than just driving around ovals, which is fair enough. There are a load of options to tinker with, and real drivers and sponsors in the game, which is what you'd expect these days. They also point out you can pause and replay, which is always good for showing off those near misses to your mates down the pub. Looks like they'll give it a proper review next month when they've had more of a play. Can't wait. This page in N64 Magazine is giving us a glimpse at a couple of games they're previewing. First up is Battletanx. It's a bit of a mad one, this. Set in a post-apocalyptic future, where women are the most valuable commodity, apparently. You're battling in tanks, a bit like Twisted Metal, but they're saying it's got more depth. It's from 3DO, for up to 4 players, and slated for release next summer. Looks like you can have a right laugh blowing up buildings with thermonuclear weapons, which is always a bonus. Then there's Puma Street Soccer. This is a four-a-side footy game in urban locations, or even indoors by the looks of it. Sunsoft are doing this one, again for up to 4 players, no date on it yet. They reckon it's arcade style, and features some real-life players like Maradona and Matthäus. The reviewer doesn't seem totally sold on the footy just yet, saying they'll get more info when they actually play it. Both are preview titles, so not hitting the shelves just yet. This page in N64 Magazine is having a look at a couple of games, starting with Lego Racers. It's a cute racer, they say, reminding us of building Lego cars as kids, which is a nice touch of nostalgia. Of course, Lego sets are a bit pricey these days, aren't they? This game is coming spring '99, apparently on 64 megs, and it seems to be set across different Lego themes like space and medieval. You can build your cars, customize them, all that sort of thing. They mention tyre marks and futuristic Lego action. Sounds alright, I suppose. A bit pricey at £40 maybe, but probably cheaper than a real Lego set these days. Then there's NFL Quarterback Club 99 from Acclaim. This one is out a bit sooner, October and November 98 for US and UK respectively. They reckon it might not be quite as good as EA's Madden 98, but the last one sold well. Apparently this one's a big improvement visually, and they've got motion capture for players. They've got 30 team playbooks, or you can make your own. And it's going head to head with Madden 99, naturally. They mention player models are good, and something about a memory expansion pack. And they note that players can get a bit stuck on the pitch and side view isn't great. Sounds like your typical footy game, really. There's a screenshot with number 8 Aikman and number 50 Robinson, so you know who's who. This page right then, it's a look back at the world of pocket-sized electronic critters, Tamagotchi and the like, back in '98. Seems like they were causing a bit of a stir. The reviewer is having a bit of a moan about them, to be honest, calling them buggers, and questioning if they're just a fad, or a sign of something more, well, social out of touch, shall we say. He reckons Nintendo and Bandai are to blame for this craze of handheld games machines, listing off a few like the Levegety. Remember that bizarre thing? Gokis, Sega V, Ems, and Neo Geo Pocket. Beggy Yuda, there's a big picture of a pink Hello Kitty Tamagotchi type thing, and the article goes on about how these things might drive you mad, even to the point of wanting to pluck someone's eyebrows out with your teeth. Charming. Apparently, some boffins did a test, and found these things can send people loopy. Then there's a bit about Pocket Monsters Pikachu, or Pokemon Yellow as we'd probably call it now. Nintendo had announced it, a cunning spin on the original Red and Green, or Blue and Red as we knew them here I suppose. It's gonna be in colour on the Game Boy and have all new graphics, bits with the bloke from the telly in it, extra monsters, and Pikachu talking, apparently. They were pushing the link-up cable for battles and competitions too. It sounds alright I suppose if you were into that sort of thing. They reckon it's heading for the UK soon, so something to look out for, maybe. This page has got a few bits and bobs going on, doesn't it? There's a piece about how Sony is doing better than Nintendo and Sega in terms of sales, which wasn't really a surprise at the time, the PlayStation was massive. Then there's a bit about the new Game Boy Color. Apparently it'll be able to use infrared to chat between machines, which sounds a bit fiddly to be honest, but may be useful for trading Pokemon. Speaking of Nintendo handhelds, they're also banging on about the Pocket Pikachu thingy. Clipping it to your belt to store energy as you walk around. Honestly, who came up with these ideas? And then they mention a Pocket Hello Kitty one too. Can you imagine the beeping from that thing? Torture devices is what they are. There's also a section about body harvest, looks like it's still delayed, and no one really knows what's going on with it. They've even got a picture of it, looks a bit rough around the edges to be honest. Oh, and there's a bit about Japanese gamers liking games with no bugs, fancy that. Down at the bottom they've been to a Pokemon Center, typical Japanese madness, isn't it? A whole shop just for Pokemon stuff, and apparently they even have a massive telly showing the anime. I wouldn't be surprised if they wanted to open one in Bath, everyone was Pokemon mad back then. They even included a picture of some fluffy Pikachu toy. Latte. And lastly, there's the Learn Japanese bit, teaching you how to say things like I'm hungry and shut up. Always useful phrases to know. And a slightly strange phrase about white cats being the devil. Right then, page done. This page from N64 Magazine is doing one of their special investigation pieces, and it seems they've sent someone off to Finland to have a look at a new driving game. Finland, eh? Bit of a trek for a game. Turns out it's all about V-Rally, which was a pretty big game on the PlayStation back in the day. A PlayStation game coming to the N64, that was a bit of a surprise, wasn't it? Warrington. Anyway, they're saying it was arguably the rally game on the PlayStation, and they've tweaked it and tightened it up for the N64. Apparently it should be out in November, and it's going to change the way we think about driving games, or so they reckon. Easy. Right. Maybe. But dramatic, aren't they? The article goes on about how PlayStation conversions aren't usually a cause for celebration at N64 Magazine, which is fair enough, you want games made for your console, but they're making an exception for V-Rally. Apparently Eden Studios are doing the conversion, and they reckon it'll be the best version of the game. They're even suggesting it'll knock spots off other N64 races like Top Gear Rally and San Francisco Rush. Bit harsh on those games maybe. Gala. There are some screenshots of the game itself, looks like a fairly standard rally game from the time, you know, polygons and all that, and there's a caption saying one of the viewpoints, far behind Chase, is the slowest. Not sure why they're highlighting that, bit of an odd detail to pick out. Still, V-Rally on the N64 could be alright I suppose if you were into that sort of thing. This page is having a look at V-Rally 98, Championship Edition they're calling it, for the N64 of course. Infogrames are bringing this one out, and it's slated for release over here on November 27th apparently. Says it's for 1 or 2 players. Looks like the chaps across the pond in the US are still waiting to hear about their release date, says TBAA for them. Judging by the big car picture it's a racer, rally driving maybe? Looks a bit snowy and blurry but hopefully it plays alright when it comes out, we'll see. This page in the magazine is having a look at V-Rally 98 on the N64. It's all about the championship mode in the game, based loosely they say, on the FIA World Rally Championship, but they've made up the locations and drivers to save on licensing fees. Cheeky. Apparently there are 8 rally locations in total, with 52 stages across them, and different weather effects thrown in for good measure. They are focusing on 4 locations in particular. First up is Indonesia. Jungle stages, they're saying slap on the mosquito repellent and watch out for the trees, classic rally advice. Then it's England Yorkshire in July, so expect it to be wet and muddy on the moors. A typical rally they reckon, asphalt and dirt. Next is Spain, set in Catalonia, narrow roads through villages, and apparently it starts each race with a Sega rally-style intro, whatever that is supposed to mean. Lastly, they mention Safari in Kenya, Red Savannah, with a bit of a questionable joke about putting spears down. They say the maps look simple but the tracks are not, so we'll see about that. They also touch on the cars in the game, mentioning World Rally cars, like the Class A ones, and kit cars, which are a bit closer to road cars apparently. They rattle off some names: Toyota Corolla, Subaru Impreza, Mitsubishi Lancer, Ford Escort, Peugeot 306 Maxi, and Renault Megane Maxi. All the usual suspects you'd expect in a rally game back then. Seems like they are trying to give a decent overview of V-Rally 98. Looks alright for a rally game on the N64. This page in N64 Magazine is having a look at V-Rally, which was quite the racer back then. It seems to be previewing different locations in the game, calling them rounds. We've got Corsica, which they say is Napoleon's birthplace and a bit rocky. Then it's off to New Zealand, described as lovely twice. France is next, set in the Alps with snow and filthy hairpins. Sounds about right for a rally game. Lastly, Sweden is mentioned, with snow and the need to rethink your driving style. For each location, they've got a little screenshot and a comment. Corsica is about the French getting to, New Zealand is about the in-car view being good, France is about terrorizing French towns like a German, and Sweden is just about the snowy roads. Classic gaming magazine humor. Warrington Norso, they're also giving a quick rundown on some of the cars you can drive. The Citroën Xara is for learners apparently, while the Seat Ibiza EV2 is similar to the Nissan but with a less irritating name, a bit of a dig there. The Skoda Octavia is praised for handling over speed, and the Vauxhall Astra is a newbie to the ranks, being front-wheel drive. The Hyundai Coupe RV2 is a rally favourite and fast, and the Nissan Almera, well, they're not too impressed, calling it a wooden spoon contender, based on its advert quality. Cheeky. Finally, they mention secret cars that you can unlock by winning the championship, hinting there are 3 but maybe more. Good old secret unlocks, always loved those. This page in N64 Magazine issue 21, eh? Right, it's all about V-Rally on the N64, looks like a preview or feature. It's got this UK is Go headline, bit cheesy, in it. Welcome to the first stage of the British Rally. 3, 2, 1, go! Corny. So, they're running through the British Rally stage in the game. Number 1 says to set your car up for the conditions, you know, asphalt or mud, dead simple stuff. Number 2, graphical whiz. Yeah, back then it probably was impressive. Number 3 is about the British Rally being a good starter stage because of asphalt roads and a black line to follow, makes it sound a bit on rails, doesn't it? Number 4, lining up for corners using the roadside, typical rally advice. Number 5, long straights, get some speed up, obviously. Number 6, get to the end of them, profound. Number 7, be ready to brake, cheers for the tip. There's a bit in a box called Expert Help about Ari Vatanen, the rally legend. Apparently Eden Studios got him in to help with the game, making suggestions about handling and making it a bit more serious simulation-like, which was alright I suppose. We didn't want another arcade racer all the time, did we? Then there's a mastery bit at the bottom, saying how deep the game is, especially for first-time N64 developers. They reckon if you speed through the courses you'll wonder how first-time N64 developers, Eden, managed to pack so much in. They're going on about the car handling being good, rear-wheel drive cars sliding, front-wheel drive pivoting, and the braking and acceleration being more realistic than other games. Not like San Francisco Rush apparently, which, let's be honest, was a bit bonkers. They're saying it's as much skill as just going for it, and the computer cars are decent opponents, even if there aren't loads of them. Jud. 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 Remember it being alright? Nothing amazing but solid enough for the time. They were pushing the realistic handling angle here, weren't they? Moving away from just flat-out arcade-style races. Good times. Good times. This page from the mag is having a look at V-Rally on the N64. It's all about 2-player head-to-head racing, which was always a laugh back in the day, especially with split-screen. They're saying the graphics are decent for the time, even in split-screen mode, which is good because sometimes those modes could be a bit of a blurry mess. Apparently they played a version that was a bit slow, but they reckon it'll be smoother when it's actually out. Gee. They're going on about how realistic the rally driving feels, comparing it to driving at 135 miles per hour on a freshly ploughed field, which sounds like a bit of an exaggeration, but you get the idea. It's meant to be exciting, even if you aren't a real rally driver. There's arcade mode where you've got other computer cars to race against, and the championship mode sounds like it's trying to be a proper rally championship experience, which is what you'd hope for. There are a few screenshots dotted around showing the game in action, with the usual on-screen speedo and lap times and all that. One screenshot is even showing a night section with headlights, which they seem quite chuffed with. Apparently the designers at Eden Studios have worked on Top Gear Rally and Multi-Racing Championship before, so they've got some rally game pedigree it seems. They're even talking about a PlayStation version and a sequel, so they must be quite confident about it. They reckon it's going to be out in November, and will be up against Top Gear Overdrive, which is a fair bit of competition, mind you. This page is a proper blast from the past, isn't it? It's an N64 Magazine special interrogation with Howard Lincoln, the president of Nintendo of America. Blimey, that's a name I've not heard in ages. It's all about the past, present and future of the N64, which was still pretty new and exciting back then. There's a bit of a profile about Lincoln on the left, saying he was a lawyer, and was even involved in trademarking Shigeru Miyamoto's first game, Donkey Kong. Donkey Kong! That brings back memories of arcades, and then the SNES, or SNES as some people called it. It was a massive game back in the day. Proper classic. Apparently Nintendo even had trouble when MCA tried to sue them over it, which sounds like a right old legal headache. Then there's the interview itself. It seems N64 Magazine managed to corner Howard Lincoln at ECTS, the European Computer Trade Show, remember that? That was the big game show over here back in the day, before it all became too corporate. They're asking him why Nintendo suddenly decided to have a big presence at ECTS because apparently they hadn't bothered much before. Lincoln's saying they made a decision in '98 to focus more on Europe, centralizing their publishing and all that. He mentions a meeting in Rome where they announced they wanted to show their commitment to us European gamers by being at ECTS. Sounds like a bit of corporate waffle, but it was good to see Nintendo taking Europe more seriously. There's a funny little speech bubble with some bloke saying, sure, good pointer, James, whisper, who the hell is this freak? Bit cheeky that. Typical magazine humor back then, eh? Overall, it's a good snapshot of Nintendo at the time, trying to conquer Europe with the N64 and all that. Good times, good times. This page in N64 Magazine, blimey, it's all about delays and Zelda, as usual back then. There's a big headline saying the 64DD, that disk drive add-on for the N64, isn't coming to Europe or America until 1999, maybe Japan in mid-99. Typical, eh? We always seem to get things last. There's chat about Nintendo setting up translation in Europe, which is supposed to mean games get released here at the same time as the US and Japan, except for some like 1080 snowboarding which was held back to fit the ski season. Seems sensible enough, I suppose. They mention Rogue Squadron and Zelda getting simultaneous release though, which is good news for us eager beavers waiting for Zelda. The article goes on about Zelda 64, calling it, Gone with the Wind of video games. A bit much maybe? But yeah, we were all massively hyped for it. They reckon they'll sell loads in the US, and that the English translation is top notch. It's all about whether it can live up to the insane expectations, they ask. Then there's a bit reflecting on the N64 launch, wondering if Nintendo could have done things better, saying maybe they should have got dev kits out quicker. They also mentioned Donkey Kong Country being in production, which we knew was coming from Rare, didn't we? Good times those were with Rare. There's talk about quality over quantity, saying Nintendo refused to rush games, which is fair enough. They list a load of games coming soon like Banjo-Kazooie, Perfect Dark, Jet Force Gemini, Conker 64, and Donkey Kong 64, a right old list of crackers there to be fair, must admit. And right at the bottom there's a funny little story about Nintendo suing over King Kong copyright, and some lawyer called Lincoln who won and ended up working for Nintendo. Bit random that is. Oh, and a little note saying F-Zero had the first English translation on the Nintendo stand at some show. Right you are. This page of the magazine is doing a bit of an interrogation special on the N64. It's chatting about what third-party developers are thinking, and it seems at the start they were a bit unsure about the N64, but now they're getting quite keen. They reckon it's because they've seen what Nintendo can do, and realize they can't just rip off the games like they can with CDs on the PlayStation. Cheeky blighters. Worry! They're talking about the 64DD as well, saying it won't be out here or in America until late 98 or even 99. Apparently it's all down to costs and they haven't found a killer game for it yet. Bit of a worry that. Mengy. Then there's a section on Zelda, and Lincoln reckons it's gonna be a massive game and live up to all the hype. He's well chuffed with the English language version, saying it's top notch. Good to hear, as we've all been waiting for ages for this one. Warrington Tra. There's also a bit about software piracy, saying Sony has problems with it on the PlayStation, and it's harder on N64 cartridges. Probably a good thing for Nintendo, eh? Warrington Norsa. Oh, and they're dead excited about Turok 2 using the 4MB RAM expansion pack, saying it'll make the graphics loads better. We'll see about that. And Rogue Squadron got a mention as being important at some game show too. So yeah, that's the gist of this page. A bit of a mixed bag really. Some good news, some maybe not so good. This page features an interview with someone from Nintendo, under the heading, Lincoln on Rare. They're talking about how good an investment Rare was, and how they share the same vision for games. It's very corporate speak, but essentially, they're happy with Rare. There's also a bit about the 4MB expansion pack, which they haven't named yet and don't think 4MB expansion pack is very catchy. Which is fair enough, it's not exactly thrilling, is it? They touch on whether Nintendo are relying too much on Rare, because a lot of the games people are looking forward to, apart from Zelda and F-Zero, are from Rare. Nintendo's guy is saying they've invested in other developers too, like Left Field in the US, and they've got other things going on we don't know about. They're trying to downplay the Rare reliance a bit, but everyone knew Rare were the kings back then. There's a question about Sega's Dreamcast and whether Nintendo is worried, and the response is pretty dismissive. They don't see it as a threat yet, saying it depends if Sega can make good software. Bit of fighting talk there. Goo. Then there's a bit about cartridges versus CDs and piracy, and they're still happy with cartridges, and the fact developers can get great games on them. They're saying they're going to spend a lot of money on making sure their games aren't pirated, whatever medium they use for the next console. Boo. Finally, they ask about favorite games, and this chap says he's not a massive gamer, but likes Tetris and loved Color Boy, GoldenEye on the N64, and Super Mario 64. He mentions the analog stick on the N64 being a game changer for platform games. There's a picture too, looks like the Nintendo stand at some game show. It says Nintendo 04, and has a big N64 logo. It looks quite impressive for the time, lots of people milling about. They mention in a little box that Nintendo had a slightly more impressive presence at this year's ECTS show. This page is an RPG news special, and blimey it's all about the upcoming Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time for the N64. Right on the top there's a couple of anime-looking characters, not sure who they are, but the main focus is definitely Zelda. Blimey Zeddy. They've got some new pictures in here, showcasing what looks like early gameplay. One shot is of young Link facing off against this massive frog bloke. Apparently he's supposed to be a king, but looks more like something you'd find down the pond. The caption even jokes he doesn't look like a frog, except to some bloke called Will who's obviously never seen one. Cheeky. There's another picture of Link with his fairy Nevi. They say she's a personal fairy helper who doesn't like getting wet. Fair enough, fairies and water, who knew? They mention you've got to press A to read signs. Groundbreaking stuff for the time, eh? Then we've got Link chatting to what they reckon is a shopkeeper, though they're not convinced. They're wondering what on earth this shopkeeper is, but concede he's commendably big. Sounds about right for a Zelda game, always some odd characters knocking about. Another shot shows Link meeting some bloke in Hyrule, says hello, and then apparently climbs off. Rude little man, the caption says. Bit harsh, maybe he was in a rush to save Hyrule or something. Rue. And check out this owl, massive isn't it? They're having a laugh about its size too, saying, when it comes to owls, size matters. Right you are, magazine. They reckon it'll be giving out wise advice, just like the owl did in the Game Boy Zeldas. Fingers crossed it's not too cryptic, some of that old Zelda advice was a bit bonkers. Right? Finally there's a shot of Link's treehouse, and they're stating it as fact. Link's treehouse, this is fact, yes. Alright then, we believe you. They also mention a shot from the very first section playable at Space World, so this is clearly quite early stuff we're seeing. All in all, it's getting us all excited for Ocarina of Time. Looks like it's gonna be massive, and typically Zelda weird. Can't wait to get my hands on it, even if this Frog King does look a bit daft. This page is all about the massive anticipation for the new Zelda game, Ocarina of Time. They're saying it's either coming out on the 27th of November, or the 4th of December over here in the UK, and they're making a big deal about it being a birthday present for someone called James. Bless him. Apparently, Nintendo are promising this time it's definitely going to happen, no more delays, which we've heard before, haven't we? The reviewers going on about how important this game is, saying it's going to be like Mario 64 all over again, redefining video games and all that. Bit much maybe, but they are excited, saying it's a miracle they're even getting to write about it, as they've been showing Zelda screenshots since way back in the magazine's first issue. They're talking about the graphics looking better now than early shots of Link in empty towns, and some basic skeleton enemies. There are a few screenshots dotted around. One has a caption about Link popping into the Hyrule branch of ASDA, which is a bit of a laugh, wondering if his car's safe in the car park. Another one is of a strange-looking creature, and the caption says, "Who is that? Doesn't look very friendly to us. It dances and it's ugly." Link looks shocked. Cheeky. Then there's Link holding a massive bomb over his head, looking like he's about to chuck it. And finally, there's a weird alien-looking thing that they describe as half sweet, half disturbing, and say, they'll let us know who it is later. Intriguing, I suppose. They're also mentioning the translation, saying they've put effort in to make it good for us Europeans and Americans, which is fair enough. Japanese RPG translations can be a bit dodgy sometimes. Apparently some American journalists were raving about the game after seeing it at some Nintendo summit. Right at the end they mentioned Zelda was shown off at Space World in Tokyo last year, and that even though Metal Gear Solid is getting a lot of attention, Zelda will be the real winner when it comes out at Christmas '98. They reckon we've only got about 65 days to wait for the greatest game the world has ever seen. Strong words, let's hope it lives up to the hype. This page is all about a competition in N64 Magazine, right? Proper retro stuff. It's shouting "Win!" at you in big letters and promising the first copy of The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time. Blimey, remember the fuss about that game? They've got a picture of Link, looking all heroic, and some lizard geezer, who looks a bit tasty for Link to have a go at. Capuzzo. Apparently you'd start seeing Zelda packaging in places like HMV and Electronics Boutique, to drum up excitement, and they reckon it's Miyamoto's latest masterpiece. A bit much maybe, but we were all gagging for it. To enter you had to answer some questions, typical magazine quiz, things like how many Zelda games before Ocarina, when Zelda 64 was first shown to the public, where Nintendo's US base is, what Link's flying sidekick is called, bit of a giveaway that one, and a code word on the Zelda boxes. You fill in the form, chop it out carefully, and send it off to Box Clever in Bath. Usual rules apply, entries by Monday the 23rd of November, no Nintendo or magazine mates allowed, first 10 correct answers win and you get the game and a year's sub to N64 Magazine. Not bad for a bit of Zelda knowledge, eh? This page is a right old blast from the past, isn't it? Looks like we've got a feature on Turok 2 Seeds of Evil in N64 Arena Magazine, issue 21. It's splashed across the page with a massive picture of that dinosaur. The sort that used to give you nightmares back then. Exclusive, it shouts, like it's some massive scoop, which I suppose it probably was at the time. They're teasing whether it can beat GoldenEye, which was the big question for any shooter back then, wasn't it? GoldenEye beater? Always the benchmark. You gotta flick over to page 52 to find out, apparently. And then there's a guide to scoring, which is a bit of a laugh. They're laying down the law on how they mark games, saying N64 carts are pricey, so they don't hand out top marks lightly. 85% and above is star game territory, only for the real cream of the crop. Then you've got the 84% to 70% range, which is jolly good fun. Below that, 69% to 50% is perfectly playable but just isn't special. Ouch, bit harsh maybe? Then 49% to 20% is for games lazily programmed. And right at the bottom, 19% to 0% is disgraceful behavior. Sounds like they didn't pull any punches, did they? Good on 'em. Reminds you of simpler times, reading this old magazine. This page from N64 Magazine takes you right back to '98, doesn't it? Looks like a bustling front section, kicking off with Glover, bless him. Seems he's the most original game on the N64, according to them anyway. Bit of a fanfare for a game about a glove, eh? Then there's Gex64, with that smug lizard looking pleased with himself. Apparently we're supposed to find out why he's grinning. Intriguing. Bro. Moving on, there's some snowboarding action with 1080 degrees snowboarding. Nintendo's brilliant border game, they're calling it. And Bomberman Hero is making an appearance, Bomberman's second 3D adventure, so they say. Then Wailea Country Club, golf for the N64 crowd, and something called Trump World, described as very slow Japanese card game. Not exactly selling it, are they? Down below there's a section explaining how their reviews work. How it works, it shouts. They're judging games on visuals, sounds, mastery, lifespan, and then giving an overall verdict. Sounds like they're trying to be all scientific about it. Team 64 Inches has their say as well, with little review snippets. James Ashton wasn't too impressed with V-Rally 98, calling it an L-plate. Ouch. Paul Jarrell liked Bomberman, naturally, and Andrea Ball seems to have a soft spot for 1080 degrees. Mark Green is on about Trump World, saying it's popular, and James Price is reviewing Gex64, calling some weapon in it ingenious. Martin Kitt seems to be all about Glover, saying he doesn't need a weapon, which is a bit vague. Game of the month seems to be spread around a bit. V-Rally 98, Bomberman, Legend of Zelda, Turok 2, Glover 1080 and Trump World get mentions. Looks like they're covering a fair range of games, from racing to puzzles to shooters. Classic N64 era stuff, really. This page is a cracking full-page spread for Turok 2, Seeds of Evil. Blimey, look at that Turok fella. Proper menacing dinosaur, mouth wide open, claws out, all very dramatic. It's shouting Tur in big white letters, so you can't miss it. It lives, it breathes, it roars. Bit over the top in it? But that's Turok for you, always was a bit loud. Down in the corner, there's a little info box, typical magazine stuff. Acclaim is the publisher. Says it's coming out in late October, which at the time we were all buzzing about. Autumn was always a good time for games. It's a 256 meg game, which was quite something back then. The bigger the better, right? Controller pack XX pages, cartridge backup, rumble pack compatible, all the usual guff. And a price of £40. Ouch, games were pricey back then, weren't they? There's a couple of badges, one saying exclusive, and another with a gold star saying N64 star game, so they're clearly rating it highly, or just trying to get us hyped up. And a little line at the bottom mentioning they did a special investigation on Turok 2 in issue 19, so it's not the first time they've banged on about it. Still, dinosaurs and blasting stuff on the N64, what's not to like? This page is all about Turok 2, Seeds of Evil for the N64. Seems like they're quite chuffed about it, reckon it's been anticipated for 21 months. Apparently veterans of the first game can vouch for how big a deal this is. They're saying it's on a massive 256 meg cart, which was quite something back then. The graphics are getting hyped up too, especially if you had the memory expansion pack. Apparently it's the best looking console game and even rivals PC games, even in standard resolution. They're banging on about the scope of the game, 6 levels, or rather 6 different graphical environments with loads of subsections in each, making it feel pretty epic, like a proper adventure. They're making a big deal about it not just being a sequel, but a whole new game built from the ground up, not just slapping on new levels to the old Turok. There are a bunch of screenshots dotted around, showing off the weapons and enemies, like some chap getting his arm blown off, and another guardian with a massive sword. They're even captioning the screenshots with little bits of gameplay advice, like when to use the tranquilizer, or that the Magnum is bloody but not the most powerful. Sounds like they are properly impressed, and to be fair, we all were at the time. Turok 2 was a looker on the old N64. This page from the magazine is all about mission types in Turok 2, which back then was looking like a decent step up from the first game, which was a bit of a mindless blast. They're running through some of the objectives you'll be facing. First up, children, which sounds a bit dodgy out of context, but you're rescuing kids who the baddies are using as bait. Standard rescue mission really. Then there's distress beacons. Apparently to get to Port Adia you've got to set off these beacons, but of course it's not straightforward. You've got to find power cells, and they're hidden away in the usual spots like drainage tunnels. Explosive crates near walls, wink wink, nudge nudge, you know how it is. Ammo storage dumps are next. Big monsters in the death marshes have ammo dumps for their ion swords, and you need to blow them up with satchel charges. Sounds like a bit of a seek and destroy mission. Prisoners is another rescue one. This time it's grown-ups being held. Again, you've got to free them, and each cell is guarded by a purlin, which I imagine is one of the nasties. Force field generators are the next objective. This is on the Hive of the Mantids level. You need to shut down 4 generators to stop insect invasions via rift gates. Sounds like a bit of a maze level, and heavily guarded naturally. Finally, queen embryos. You're in the hive again, and there are queen eggs scattered about. Shooting them makes them explode, sometimes with surprises apparently. You've got to knock off these eggs to stop the mantid population getting out of hand. At the bottom, there's a bit about fogging. Seems like fogging was a big problem in the first Turok. Used to hide pop-up, but they overdid it and it looked a bit pants. For Turok 2, they've listened to complaints and improved it, so there's just enough fog to disguise scenery drawing without being too obvious. Welcome to Smoothsville, USA, bit sarcastic. But fair enough, fogging was a bit of a joke in some of those early 3D games. Good to hear they sorted it out a bit for the sequel. This page showcases the weapon selection from Turok 2, Seeds of Evil, giving you the lowdown on all the boomsticks you can get your hands on. They've called it rock and roll, cheeky blighters. Starting at the top, you've got the flare, which they say is about as useful as a chocolate teapot in a fight, but good for lighting up dark bits. Then there's the talon, a swipe and hope job for early enemies, apparently a bit risky later on. The warblade sounds a bit more like it, wrist mounted with a satisfying ping. Slicey, dicey, spicy, they've put, bit much if you ask me. Next is the pistol, slow but sweet when you first find it, a bullet peddler. The bow is there too, arrows sticking into enemies, no blood, just plenty of pain. Alright, settle down reviewer. Moving down we have the tech arrow, powered by tech, whatever that is, making it a cocktail of death apparently. Sounds good. Then the charge dart rifle, freezes enemies useful. Shotgun, classic head remover for raptors, paints the walls red, lovely. Magnum, powerful rapid-fire handgun, good for entrails cakehole, whoever entrail is. Tranquilizer dart gun, stuns enemies, opens up secret areas full of booty, ooh misses. Next row, firestorm cannon, barrel rotates, fires red lasers, tears enemies apart, yum. Bit enthusiastic, aren't we? Shredder, lasers that bounce off walls, keep going until they hit something. PFM laser, slow to charge but big boom, absolutely fantastic. Grenade launcher, bendy grenades for round corners, good for the hive level. Scorpion launcher, 3-pronged missiles, 1 killing, missile slicing, 3 spreading. Bit much to take in. Bottom row, sunfire pod, lob 'em to blind enemies, then switch weapons and Buddha. Cerebral bore, missile that burrows into enemy heads, blood frenzy. Razor wind, boomerang with a side order of hurt, chops enemies up. Flamethrower, fry enemies alive, watch them plead for mercy, you've got to fry. Lastly, the nuke. No one knows its effect until the game comes out, mysterious. So a good selection of weapons for Turok 2 it looks like, something for everyone, from the stealthy dart gun to the outright explosive nuke. Hopefully it's as good as they make out. This page from N64 Magazine is all about Turok 2, Seeds of Evil, proper blast from the past that. They're calling it, let me take you by the hand, puzzles to pull. Sounds about right for a Turok game back then, eh? Chat. It's a walkthrough for part of the first level, showing you how to get through the 5th subsection, which kicks off with a kaboom, naturally. The guide goes through different steps, like dealing with these fireborn blokes, and then you've got these growler enemies that can sniff you out from miles away. Bit vicious they were, especially when you were still getting your bearings with the controls. They even mention sticking a magnum hitherwards, classic N64 mag humor. Then it moves on to Mission 1, Rescue Children. It walks you through finding a child, getting through a cage, finding switches, and dealing with more enemies, including raptors. Those blighters were always a pain. Looks like the goal is to get through this dark corridor, warp to the next section, and then bam, raptors. Gah! Look at the size of those dentures, they say. Bit dramatic, aren't they? Finishes up with some new save points, and another dark corridor naturally. Below all that, there's a bit called New and Improved, Enemy AI. They're saying the enemies in Turok 2 are proper clever compared to the first game. Apparently in the first Turok, enemies just ran at you. But in Turok 2 they're more cunning, try to protect themselves, and even hunt in packs. They mention drones hiding behind eggs, and raptors springing out when you turn corners. Sounds like they made it a bit tougher this time around, which was probably a good thing, kept you on your toes. This page in the magazine is all about Turok 2, Seeds of Evil on the N64. Looks like a walkthrough section. This one's Mission 2, Save Prisoners. It's showing you how to get through different parts of the level, like the central portal, and the marshes. Classic Turok level names, eh? They're highlighting a couple of special bits and bobs you can find in the game. First up is the plasma zoom mask, makes those entrail blokes with the red eyes easier to spot. Then there's the central portal itself, a hub area to get to other levels apparently, and finally Disco Death Reprise, which sounds like a rather gruesome way to finish off enemies. The walkthrough shows screenshots from the game, pretty dark as you'd expect from Turok, lots of gunning down dinos and weird alien types. Looks like you're navigating arenas and marshy bits, trying to save some prisoners held by the Perlin, whoever they are. Seems standard fare for a Turok game back then, lots of shooting and exploring, trying to survive the mayhem. They even mention killer wasps and worm-like creatures in the water. Lovely. Yeah, Turok 2, it was a looker on the N64 back in '98, if a bit on the gory side for some. This walkthrough seems to be guiding you through the early stages, getting you prepped for the rest of the game. Always handy to have these tips when you're stuck, wasn't it? The next page in this issue, we're looking at Turok 2. Seems they're calling this section, Let Me Take You by the Hand, Continued, which is a bit cheeky, innit? It's another part of their walkthrough, this time for Mission 3, titled Destroy Ammo Dumps. Looks like the usual, guiding you through the level, telling you to pick up a satchel charge, and use it to blow up some ammo. There's bits about switches and totems, and then they mention labyrinthine tunnels of the Perlin ammo dumps. Right at the end it says to escape very quickly via the level warp, and congratulations, you've done it. Charming. Felony. Then below that they've got a section called Who Wants Some, and it's all about the multiplayer modes in Turok 2. Team mode sounds like your standard team deathmatch affair, up to 4 players teaming up. Then there's Bloodlust, which is just deathmatch by another name, everyone against everyone else in a frag frenzy. And Frag Tag, where one player is it, and everyone else chases them. Sounds like good old-fashioned fun, if a bit chaotic. They mention 7 playable characters, including Turok, Adon and the Perlin, plus some others like Sloth and Flesh Eaters, Gants and Raptors. Blimey, sounds like a right menagerie. Apparently the latter ones are weaponless but fast, which could be interesting, I suppose. For arenas, they've listed 10. Proper names like Cave Torture, Spinal Tunnels, Casual Dress, Rippage, Chaos Lab, Warfare Sound, Watery Vault, Dining for Diggers, Dare Ye Enter, and Barbecue City. Bit of variety there then. 10. Looking at the screenshots, it's all split screen action, which was the way we rolled back then, wasn't it? They say the vertical split screen can be changed to horizontal, which is a bonus. And they're going on about the control system, saying it's C buttons for direction, analog for 360 viewing, saying it worked perfectly in the first Turok. Apparently some people found it cumbersome compared to GoldenEye. Well, each to their own, I reckon. They've even included 2 control styles, Turok and Golden. Guessing Golden is the more familiar setup. Can't say I'm surprised. All in all, looks like Turok 2 multiplayer could be a laugh with your mates, plenty of modes and maps to get stuck into. This page is all about the N64 expansion pack. Remember that little black cartridge? It's being touted as the future of N64 gaming, and apparently Turok 2, Seeds of Evil, is the first proper game to use it. The article is answering questions about the pack. Apparently, it slots into the memory expansion port on the front of your N64 and doubles the RAM from 4 MB to 8 MB. Before this, developers were only working with the standard 4 MB, which seems like peanuts now, doesn't it? But back then, doubling the memory was a big deal. So what's the point? Well, with the pack in place, games can shift twice as much info into the N64's memory. This means visuals can be cranked up to 640 by 480 resolution, which the magazine reckons makes N64 games look almost like accelerated PC games. They're calling it HIRES. Apparently, Iguana Sports titles, NFL Quarterback Club 98 and All-Star Baseball had already done 640 by 480. But Turok 2 is meant to really show off what it can do because of all the polygons and effects. They joke that games like All-Star Baseball were more Sunday morning pace, but Turok 2 is fast. Allah. When can we get our hands on one? Nintendo was planning to have it out mid-November, and Data was also in the mix. They were expecting them to retail for about 15 quid. Will other games use it? Oh, almost certainly they reckon maybe even Zelda will get in on the action. They're also wondering about whether it's worth buying, but reckon it's a bit of a no-brainer if you want the best visuals. They mention Rare, the team behind Perfect Dark, hadn't even seen one at the ECTS show, which is a bit odd. Then there's a section showing what difference the Panahawk makes in Turok 2. They've got screenshots comparing low and high settings in 4 categories: levels, monsters, blood and guts, and cerebral bore. In the low settings, things look a bit basic and pixelated, a bit blurry. Then in the high settings, with the Pengy, everything's much sharper and clearer, especially the textures. The monster detail is much better, and the blood and guts look, well, more gory I suppose. The cerebral bore looks extra messy. Finally, there's a bit about the level design in Turok 2, saying it's improved. Apparently the game is 4 times bigger than the first Turok, but the level design is better, with subdivisions that create natural breaks and make it harder to get lost, which is probably a good thing in a big game like Turok. They also say there's less precision jumping now, which might be a relief for some players. Ah, how refreshing, they say, a bit sarcastically. This page then, we've got a look at Turok 2 Seeds of Evil in N64 Arena. Right on the left there's talk of Audon, Turok's guardian. Sounds a bit of an odd bod really, not quite human looking. Apparently she's watching over Turok, while he tries to stop the Primogen from world domination. Classic stuff. Measy. Then the main chunk of the page is the review itself. They're banging on about how amazing the graphics are for the N64 at the time. Remember when Iguana were a big deal? Seems like yesterday. They reckon it's a massive step up from the first Turok. Loads more of everything. Levels, monsters, weapons. Bit of a dig at GoldenEye too, saying Turok 2 borrows from it with how the enemies react, but reckons Iguana have moved things on a bit. Visually they're really impressed, calling the textures lush, and the detail incredible. Resolution is pin sharp, all that. Sounds like they were properly wowed by how good it looked on the N64. They mention the music is dramatic and well done, and the sound in general is top notch. Enemies are faster. The AI is supposedly good, making them unpredictable, with 30 different types of beasties from bugs to ape-like things and big hulks. Weaponry is mentioned as being good too, loads of it apparently, including a spear gun and mini missile launcher. Sounds like your typical over-the-top shooter fare. Overall impression seems to be very positive. They're saying it's the best looking game on the N64, and certainly a phenomenal piece of work for the machine. They're not exactly underselling it, are they? But yeah, back then Turok 2 was pretty impressive to look at for sure. This page in N64 Magazine, takes a look at Turok 2, Seeds of Evil. Right on the front it bangs on about how Iguana, that's the developers, have really pushed the boat out with the AI, saying it's so advanced it's probably surprised even themselves. Bit dramatic, eh? Underneath that, there's talk about the graphics, pointing out the detail in the Lair of the Blind Ones level, and the flame effects, and the fact you can shoot downwards, which apparently is hot. They've got a little speech bubble, saying something like, probably needs to see a doctor, about a dinosaur, and another one from an enemy saying, bloody, take some pain little bug. Charming. Moving down, it goes on about the speech sampling, saying with 256 megs, they were expecting something extra, and they got shed loads of speech. Apparently the intro and add-ons level intros are full of lengthy monologues. Then there's the music. They reckon it's dramatically scored with strings and nerve-juddering screeches. Sounds about right for a Turok game, all a bit over the top. They give it scores in little boxes, 10 for visuals, 9 for sounds, 9 for mastery, and 9 for lifespan, and then a massive 95% overall verdict. They're calling it bigger, bolder and ballsier than the first game, and reckon it's the best game of the year so far. Bit strong maybe, but you know how mags were back then. The reviewer, Tim Weaver, seems pretty hyped, calling it pure, eye-wateringly brilliant fact. Alright Tim, calm down mate. Still, it looks like they were well impressed with Turok 2 at the time, saying it's not just a lazy sequel and it could be one of the best games on the machine. Heavy praise indeed. They even compare it to GoldenEye and Doom, and reckons Turok 2 is the new Doom. Bold claim that. Guess we were all pretty blown away by 3D shooters back then, weren't we? This page is about Gex 64. Enter the Gecko. right there in big red letters. Can't miss it. It's a preview in N64 Arena Magazine, issue 21, so must be getting towards the end of 1998, going by the October 23rd release date box. They're saying Gex rhymes with Bex, a bit of a daft line, but it's trying to say it's a bit of a geezer, I suppose, cheeky and all that. The game is from GT Interactive, and they're banging on about the story being like Adam and Eve and a serpent, but for Gex. Bit dramatic for a platformer, innit? The reviewer doesn't seem too impressed with the intro sequence, calling it rubbish and a declaration of a lack of intent. Ouch. Says it's underwhelming. Not exactly selling it, are they? Yet all. There are some screenshots, look a bit blurry as you'd expect for the N64 at the time. One shows Gex by some water, they're joking about visual glitches. Another one is inside a telly-looking level, with a timer on the screen, very 90s. The gecko himself looks a bit like a green slimy thing with attitude. They've got a table with the release date, 64 meg cart, controller pack page, rumble pack, and 40 quid price tag. 40 quid! Blimey, games were pricey back then. All in all, it's a preview that's trying to be funny but maybe doesn't make you rush out and buy it. Sounds a bit dodgy if anything. This page in N64 Magazine back in '98 is having a bit of a go at Gex 64. Enter the gecko. Right on the front it says what the Gex is going on here then, which kinda sets the tone, doesn't it? They're talking about how each level in Gex 64 is split into 3 missions to get red remotes. Apparently it's not exactly brain surgery, just going to a point, collecting stuff or tail whipping things. There are screenshots from the game, and the reviewer seems a bit underwhelmed. One picture shows a level select screen, and they're saying you have to smash 5 blood coolers in one mission. Another screenshot shows a level they call a boss level, but they reckon it's not good, just plain tedious, which doesn't sound great, does it? There's another one they call Wobbit Season, where they're saying Banjo-Kazooie makes Gex look a bit daft in comparison, especially with the fogging effect. They're really laying into the fog in the game, saying it's awful, and makes it look a poor cousin to the PlayStation and PC versions, which were supposed to be better. They mention that some developers blamed Nintendo for lack of support back then, but the reviewer here is not buying it for Gen X64. They even say while PlayStation mags were raving about the original PlayStation Gex game, this N64 version is a bit of a letdown. Apparently you can complete levels just by getting the red remotes, but there are white remotes to collect too if you're a proper completionist. The magazine seems to be suggesting N64 owners are a bit more hardcore and would try to find everything, but ultimately they are implying you might be better off buying another game rather than Gex 64. Ouch. This page from N64 Magazine back in the day is having a look at Gex 64. Enter the gecko. Right then, bonus balls. It's talking about these bonus stages you can get into by collecting certain bits and bobs in the main levels, carrots and skulls and that sort of thing, and there are screenshots showing these bonus levels, timers ticking down, collecting gems, that sort of thing. Then there's a bit about Gex's actions, you know, what he can do in the game. Apparently he can skate, and they even take a dig at Mario's skating skills, saying Gex is better. Cheeky. He can walk on walls, a nod back to the original 2D Gex game apparently. Plus, he can look, which is a standard 3D game thing really, but they're saying it's a bit slow to react in this game. Swimming is in there, but only in the N64 specific Titanic level, which they don't sound too impressed with, calling it awful. Tail swinging is another attack move, and he even yawns if you leave him idle, which they find amusingly appropriate, given the game it seems. Moving down the page they've got these little rating boxes for visuals, sounds, mastery and lifespan, all getting a score of 4 out of 5 except lifespan, which is a 5. But then the overall verdict is a pretty harsh 59%, saying they had high hopes but were let down, calling it a disappointment and wondering why anyone would buy it. Ouch. They reckon it's creatively lacking compared to Banjo and Mario, mentioning the drag factor of the game engine and saying it's just not funny or technically average. Seems like they really didn't rate it at all, poor Gex. This page in N64 Magazine issue 21, reckon it's from '98 looking at it, is having a bit of a chuckle about how to talk about this game called GL. Turns out GL is for Glover, and it's all about this magical glove. They're right, it is a bit of a daft idea, but they say it's original, and they're struggling to avoid glove puns, fair play to them. They mention other ball games, like Marble Madness, Super Tennis, and IS-98, trying to put Glover in context I suppose, and even remember that old Super Family glove thing must have been scraping the barrel there. They even bring up Mickey Mouse gloves and Bond in GoldenEye, clutching at straws a bit, aren't they? The tenner. There are a few screenshots showing Glover in action, in some colourful looking levels. One screenshot shows him in a castle area where you get crystals, another looks like a carnival bonus game where you shoot space hoppers, And another bonus room they're clearly not doing too well in. My glovely, they write. Oh dear. Another bit shows bouncing a ball up some steps, and another in a treehouse. It's all very bright and cartoony looking. Typical N64 stuff really. They reckon if you've gotten this far in the game, you qualify for the Golden Glove of Courage. Sounds a bit cheesy, but that's magazines for you back then. This page in N64 Arena is shouting about Glover, right? Remember that odd-looking game with the green blob thing? Right on the page, that's him. Then you have screenshots showing the actual game, this glove character rolling a ball about. Looks like your standard 3D platformer, I suppose. Exclusive, it boasts. Okay then, the game info says Hasbro are behind it, 64 meg, needs a controller and rumble pack. 40 quid it was, crikey they weren't cheap back then. And there are some tips in speech bubbles about getting these garabs under a bridge and collecting them. Yeah, Glover, one of those slightly oddball N64 titles, probably alright for a bit of fun, weren't they all back then? This page gives us a look at Glover on the N64. Seems like a quirky platformer where you control a glove and a ball. Right then, Worlds Apart is the main headline, breaking down some of the game's levels. First up is Atlantis. They're saying it's a fairly gentle introduction, probably to ease you in, but even then, they mention reversed controls in deep water. Sounds like a bit of a pain. Typical N64 trickery, eh? Apparently finding all these garibs in this level is a proper task though. The boss is a watery theme, described as a real pushover. Bit sarcastic there maybe. Then it's Carnival. Sounds a bit more challenging with wobbly platforms. They mention ball thieves, and even Dennis Hopper, which is a bit random. Must be some odd characters in this game. There's a tricky swing boat section and a boss who's a jolly clown. Sounds like it could be a bit creepy actually. Pirate World is next. Or Pirate as they've called it. Very original. First level is apparently tedious with slow diving. Not ideal. But then it gets better on dry land in some Cornish village sections. Bit stereotypical that. They mention remote transformation for getting unstuck in the sea. Useful I suppose. The boss is some animal pirates, parrots, sharks and monkeys. Huge, they reckon. There's a bit called That Spells Trouble. Talking about potions. Apparently you can get these potion bottles for special abilities, like strength, speed, turning enemies into frogs, and even a helicopter spell to float the ball. Sounds like the usual platforming gimmicks of the time. All in all, Glover looks like it could be a decent enough platformer for the N64, nothing groundbreaking maybe, but might be worth a rent from Blockbuster if you were stuck for something to play back then. This page in N64 Magazine is diving into Glover, remember that one? Under the heading N64 Arena. Right then, first up is Loadsables. Seems to be about the different forms your ball can take. Apparently the R button changes it. They reckon the standard rubber ball is the most useful, bowling ball for smashing walls, and a crystal ball for experts to get double points, whatever that means. They're saying the crystal ball is proper fragile, mind you. Then we're on to prehistoric. Climate change is the big issue here apparently. Ice and lava in the same level sounds a bit much even for a game, doesn't it? Dinosaurs and snowballs too, naturally. Top tip is to keep bouncing in the snow so your ball doesn't ice up and become difficult to move. Makes sense, I suppose. Boss is a dinosaur in an ice cube, called Cross Stitch. Sounds a bit of a cheeky name for a baddie, doesn't it? Carry. Next is Fear, the penultimate level, and they're calling it Hammer Horror. Bit dramatic. Saying it's more frustrating than scary though, which is probably closer to the mark for a game like Glover. Watch out for a green spirit who changes your ball, and the flyaway beach ball is apparently useful. The boss is Frankenstein themed and very difficult. Sneaky clue apparently, cryptic as you like. Space is next. Low gravity and toxic moon slime. Standard space fare really. Got to use the ball bearing's magnetic properties here. Top tip is about a little alien in a turban that crystallizes your ball. You need to wait until there's space behind it before it squashes the floor. The boss? They're not telling, but reckon you'll need loads of lives. Cheers for that helpful tip. Finally, there's a cheats section. Apparently, pausing the game and pressing buttons makes squawking noises and burping sounds. That's the in-game cheat system. They reckon it ruins the fun but lets you finish all the worlds easily if you're struggling. Teasing us with cheat codes but not actually giving them away, bit mean that, isn't it? BZZZT. Hello, are you still there? Cheeky sods. This page is a review of Glover from N64 Magazine, issue 21. It's talking about how Glover is a bit tricky to get your head around at first, being a 3D platformer where you control this glove and a bouncy ball. They're saying the graphics are a bit murky, standard for the time really, and the camera system is just what you expect from these sorts of games back then. Not always your best mate. But they do reckon the core idea of rolling this ball around is quite good. The review points out that you need to get your bouncy ball to the end of each level in one piece, without dropping it down a pit or anything. Sounds simple enough, doesn't it? But apparently mastering the controls is the real trick, which is where Glover might be a bit better than some of the other platformers around, even games like Gex. They mention you get a bunch of moves to play with, like slapping the ball, throwing it, and different combos, which is needed to get past some of the hazards. The screenshots show bits from the game. There's one with a chicken nicking the ball, another with some sort of crystal being shot out of something, and a pirate town level. Looks like your typical colourful platformer environments you'd see on the N64, even if they're not quite Banjo-Kazooie level of polish. They even joke about Glover losing his ball down a hole and saying it's not golf, which is a bit of alright. They touch on the slightly dodgy collision detection too, which, yeah, you did see a bit of in those early 3D games, where things didn't quite connect properly all the time. All in all, it sounds like they think Glover is alright. You need to put a bit of effort in to get good at it, but it could be a decent platformer if you stick with it. This page is about the game Garibaldi, or Glover as it's actually called. Looking at this, it's a review from N64 Magazine back in '98. Ah, Glover, I remember that one. It was a bit of a weird platformer, wasn't it? You controlled a glove and a ball. Warrington. They've given it 83%, which is pretty decent. The reviewer seems to think the later levels look nicer than the early ones, though still a bit foggy visually. Sounds are apparently catchy, even if they call it tacky music. Funny that. Mastery-wise, they say it's different, but maybe a bit behind the times technically. Lifespan is an 8, so it must have kept you busy for a while, especially with a time trial mode after you beat the last boss. The verdict is very original, very difficult, and ultimately very rewarding if you've got the patience. Yeah, I vaguely remember it being a bit on the tricky side. They've put very original twice there. Bit keen, aren't they? Grr. Looking at the screenshots, you can see Glover bouncing a ball around. There's a bit about Garibs, which are like playing cards you collect in the levels. Collecting them quickly gets you more points and multipliers. If you collect all of them in a world, you get a bonus level. Seems like standard collectathon stuff from back then. Brah. There's a caption about 500 points being a maxed out Garib score, and the bonus games being a Garib collector's dream. Another one warns you not to chuck the ball to the next island and miss, as it will shatter. Good to know. And Auntie Dino, if she sees Glover, she'll fly off with her head. Right then, another screenshot asks, how on earth is Glover going to get the ball over those deadly spikes? Sounds like typical platforming challenges. The reviewer reckons it's tricky to get into, and you might get fed up with failures. But if you stick with it, it becomes second nature. Says it's something a bit different and a unique experience if you don't mind a few quirks. Martin Kitts wrote the review. Overall, it sounds like they thought it was a decent, if slightly odd, game back then. 83% is a good score for N64 Magazine. Makes me almost want to dig out the old console and give it another go. Almost. This page in N64 Mag is about Bomberman Hero on the Nintendo 64. Right then, Bomberman goes 3D, does he? It says here, it's a bit strange because it's a single-player Bomberman game, no multiplayer, which is a bit of a downer if you ask me. Bomberman is always better with your mates, isn't it? But fair enough, this one gives Bomberman the ability to jump and fly, and all sorts of shenanigans. It's got that 3D camera thing going on, which they reckon is a bit dodgy at times. They've given it 66% overall, which is alright, I suppose. Visuals get a 5, sounds a 7, bit of Japanese techno apparently, mastery a 4, lifespan a 6, so pretty average across the board really. The reviewer reckons it's nothing special, but it's good enough to keep you at it, quirky and above average they say. Looking at the screenshots, it does look a bit different. Bomberman on a snowboard, jet skiing, flying about. They mention bosses like lion brick fellas, and one-eyed spiders and clowns. Sounds a bit bonkers, doesn't it? They are going on about slowdown and camera issues, which is never ideal, especially back then. You wanted your 64 games to be smooth. Still, it sounds like a decent single-player blast if you were bored and wanted something a bit different from your usual Bomberman multiplayer madness. This page, alright, it's a bit of a takedown actually. YLA Country Club on the N64 is getting absolutely hammered here, 49%. They reckon the visuals are terrible, sounds are awful, leprosy of commentators, bit harsh, in it, and no mastery to it whatsoever. Lifespan gets a 5, which I'm guessing is sarcasm, like you'd be bored rigid for ages. YLA doesn't improve on Augusta Masters, they're saying in the verdict, just got new courses that are equally as bad. Blimey. Over on the left, they're talking about Bomberman Hero, saying the jumping is better than the first N64 Bomberman game, which was a bit clunky for jumping, wasn't it? They've mentioned camera problems, par for the course back then, and reckon it's borrowed bits from Mario, Lilac Wars, even Mario again. Bit repetitive mentioning Mario twice, maybe they just really liked Mario games. Slippity slidey ice world, classic game description that, and explosions aplenty as you deal with the robot bird. Sounds like proper Bomberman chaos. They're comparing YLA to Actua Golf, which on the PlayStation wasn't bad, and PGA, probably on the SNES, or SNES as we used to say. Augusta Masters is the gold standard for golf games, isn't it? Seems like YLA Country Club just completely missed the green, as it were. This page in N64 Magazine seems to be having a bit of a chuckle about the gibberish coming out of Mario and his mates in N64 games, and reckons the 1080 degrees. Snowboarding title song has some pretty weird lyrics too, something about lick me apparently. They mentioned they'd already had a look at the Japanese version of 1080 degrees, way back in issue 14. Anyway, the main focus is on 1080 degrees snowboarding itself. There are a bunch of screenshots showing the game in action, giving tips like using the analog stick to corner properly, which was actually a pretty big deal back then, and tilting the screen for jumps, which could be a bit much. Apparently, Ricky Winterborn is the bloke to play, as if you're into the contest mode, they're calling him the king of stunts. The review itself talks about how the Japanese version had been out for ages, and the Aussie one too, and that finally, after what felt like forever, the proper PAL version is out in Europe. They're joking about British summer being rubbish, so at least we've got a winter sports game. They reckon it's a top-notch racer, and everyone should give it a go before the Americans get their hands on the sequel. Down at the bottom there's the box info for 1080 degrees snowboarding. It's out now, 64 megs, plays 1 or 2 players, needs a controller pack and rumble pack, and will set you back £40. Blimey, games were pricey then. There's also a picture of a cool-looking snowboarder chick with her board. So yeah, pretty much all about 1080 degrees snowboarding this page. This page is all about having a bit of trouble with stunts in 1080 snowboarding on the N64. It seems the reviewer reckons the game takes itself a bit seriously with its gravity-defying stunts, but they admit it is rather good fun. Apparently, pulling off a 720 or a full 1080 spin is really difficult, but very rewarding when you manage it. The combo system is mentioned as being a big part of racking up points with tricks. There's a section on secret borders. Turns out there are 3 hidden characters, in addition to the 5 you start with. You can unlock a stunt-crazy panda boarder called Rob, a speedy crystal boarder called Akari, and even a gold boarder called Kensuke if you are good enough at the game. You get them by hitting high scores and beating the game on expert mode. Hekka. Then there's a bit about the match race mode, saying the single-player game is split into 3 championships with courses that get trickier. They mention the time of day and weather changes on the courses, with blizzards and fog making things harder, but thankfully time trials are always in default conditions. Sounds about right for the time these games were getting quite detailed back then. The screenshots show some snowy mountain action and a few tricks being pulled off. Pretty standard stuff for a snowboarding game really. This page from N64 Magazine, bless it, is all about shaving seconds off your times in 1080 snowboarding. Yeah, that classic snowboarding game on the N64. They're calling it cutting corners, cheeky, coinsy. So first up, they've got Crystal Lake. Championship time of 1 minute 6 seconds apparently. They reckon the main thing is landing after a big jump and brushing snow off your expensive jacket. Very important that. Then there's Crystal Peak, a bit slower at 1 minute 32. This one's about sticking to the right, jumping on ledges, and dealing with moguls. Sounds about right, moguls are always a pain. They even suggest zooming out the camera for those. Clever clogs. 10. Finally, Golden Forest, the quickest at 1 minute 25. This one's a pure racer's course apparently. It's all about clean runs and dodging trees, and taking the left route through the trees each time. Don't worry about the trees, they won't hurt you. Yeah, cheers for that tip, really helpful. And watch out for Dion Blaster right before the finish apparently, shame if you mess up there. Tall. Down at the bottom there's a how to land, sometimes, section. Landing in 1080, yeah, that was always a bit fiddly, wasn't it? They're saying it's all about angling your board perfectly. Apparently the game is really picky, even a fraction of a degree out and you're tumbling. Energy bar goes down quick too if you mess up. They mention tapping Z to smooth things out, but even they admit it can make things worse. Pure frustration they say, which is pretty spot on actually. And yeah, Trick Attack is just a lost cause for this advice. They admit it's useless there, sorry about that. Oh, and there's a secret board bit. Pull off all the training stunts, and you get a penguin board. Apparently easier to land tricks with, but you'll lose a little cool riding it. Yeah, a penguin board, not sure about that one lads. This page in N64 Magazine, right, takes a look at 1080 degrees snowboarding. Proper tough game that was. It breaks down 3 courses, Mountain Village, Dragon Cave and Deadly Fall, with championship times of 1 minute 42, 1 minute 39 and 1 minute 15 respectively. Mountain Village, they reckon, is the most frustrating, saying just getting down in one piece is an achievement. There's a tip about a shortcut in the ice tunnel, telling you to stick to the left exit. Dragon Cave is after a near vertical drop, apparently with 6 routes to choose from. They advise against dropping over the high ridges as it's too risky. There's a tip about a dodgy bridge, and to take it gently. Deadly Fall is described as the best till last, the easiest wide open course. Tip here is to go down the middle, but to skip over the ridge on the right for a monster jump. There's a Ghost Rider tip too, explaining how to make your ghost disappear by pressing right C, which is handy if you're trying to get a clean screen, or maybe just spook your mates. Down at the bottom there's a section called Lifespan, which is pretty funny, basically saying you'll never complete this game by just messing about, proper hardcore stuff back then. They compare the controls to Wave Race, which was also N64, saying if you're good at that you might have a head start here. Sounds about right, both Nintendo games, both pretty slick control systems. They're not wrong though, 1080 degrees was a bit of a beast if you wanted to properly master it. This page from N64 Magazine is doing a review of 1080 degrees snowboarding. It's talking about the contest mode, which sounds like a mix of races and trick challenges. They reckon getting a score of 100,000 is respectable in this mode, and 140,000 is top-notch. Blimey, that sounds like a challenge. Visually they've given it an 8 out of 10, saying it looks smooth and like the real deal, although they are a bit sniffy about the two-player mode, saying it loses detail. Sounds also gets an 8, perfect sound effects apparently, but the music is maybe a bit iffy, depending on your taste. Mastery gets another 8, controls are spot on and courses are well designed, and Lifespan gets a 9, suggesting it will keep you busy for ages, mastering all those 1080 spins. The screenshots show some in-game action, snowboarders doing tricks and racing down snowy courses, typical 90s graphics really. They mention the characters' baggy clothes rippling in the wind, which is a bit of detail they were clearly impressed by back then. The reviewer, Martin Kitts, says it's a must-play if you're a hardcore gamer, and gives it a final verdict of 89%. Not bad at all. Sounds like they were quite taken with it back in the day. This page features a review of a game called Trump World, bottom up for the N64. It's described as a card game with an Alice in Wonderland theme, which sounds a bit odd, to be honest. Even back then you wouldn't expect that. Apparently there weren't many card games on the N64, except for maybe bonus bits in games like Banjo-Kazooie and Diddy Kong Snap, which is true enough. The review isn't exactly glowing. They call it a very dull game and monotonous card jousting, which doesn't sound great. They reckon it's aimed at people who are rubbish at card games, as there's no difficulty at all. Looking at the little box, it says it's already out in Japan and America, but doubtful for the UK, which was often the case back then with N64 imports. It cost around £20, which was a fair whack back then. It uses the controller pack for saves, and might use the rumble pack, typical N64 stuff. There are some screenshots of the game, and the reviewer even calls the graphics cute, fluffy, very badly drawn indeed. One shows Alice in Wonderland, another is a screen full of cards, and another seems to be a victory screen of some sort. They've got these little captions for each screenshot going through a level, and it all sounds incredibly simple and repetitive, matching pairs of cards against a rabbit, then some other characters, not exactly thrilling stuff. Overall, it sounds like they weren't impressed. The reviewer basically says it's boring and repetitive, and only recommended if you're really terrible at cards and want an easy win. They even jokingly mention a lifetime subscription to N64 Magazine as a prize, but quickly say no thanks. So yeah, probably not one I would have rushed out to import, even back in the day. This page in N64 Magazine is having a look at a game called Trump World, which sounds a bit dodgy for a start, doesn't it? It's from the import arena section, so it's come over from Japan. Apparently it's full of Alice in Wonderland characters like the Mad Hatter, and you end up playing card games with them. The review reckons it's got a load of different card games in it, cribbage and poker and the like, but most of them aren't up to much. They highlight a blackjack-style game, and one called Snap, or something similar, as being alright though. They mention the graphics are supposed to be 3D and spectacular, but that's probably pushing it a bit for the N64. There's a screenshot showing Alice with 6 aces on her dress, which is a bit weird. Use in. Apparently, the music and sounds are repetitive and irritating, and the game is proper difficult. The review gives it a measly 25% right at the bottom, saying it's only for card game fanatics or Alice in Wonderland obsessives. So, not exactly a must-have then, is it? This page is all about a Banjo-Kazooie competition. Proper retro stuff this. There's a massive picture of Banjo and Kazooie, the bear and bird duo, holding one of those jigsaw pieces from the game, and Banjo's even got a speech bubble shouting about win hard cash. It's all about proving you are the best at Banjo, and it says there are 10 leagues to enter, one for each of the 9 levels in the game, plus one for your overall time. You could enter as many as you liked, which is fair enough. To get in on it, you had to be faster than the qualifying times obviously, and prove you did it somehow. I guess they didn't just want everyone making stuff up. They were going to print the best 20 times in each league in issue 23 of N64 Magazine, so you could have seen your name in print if you were good enough. Apparently the top players would win prizes, and the more leagues you won the more cash you'd get. There's even a little picture of Mumbo Jumbo there explaining how it all works. Good times. Banjo-Kazooie was a great game back then, wasn't it? Pretty colourful. Pretty fun. This page in N64 Magazine, back in November '98, is all about Banjo-Kazooie. Remember that one? Calling it the best game of the summer. Bit much maybe, but it was pretty good, I'll give them that. They're running some sort of best banjo player competition, saying if you finished the game, got all the notes and jigsaws, then you might be the king game player or something like that. They're setting up a time trial thing like they did with Mario Kart in earlier issues, and they're even giving out prizes. Fancy that. Apparently the game has its own clock, which was a pretty cool feature for the time. To prove you're the best you have to record your time and send it in. They're giving you 3 ways to do it. With a Game Boy Pocket camera. Remember those grainy things? Or a normal camera. Or even videoing the telly. Instructions for each are there. Take a picture of the screen with the level name, and score if you're using the pocket camera, or a normal camera, making sure it's all legible, and sending it in. Or if you're fancy you could even video it using your video recorder, plugged into the N64. Those were the days, eh? This page in the magazine is all about a Banjo-Kazooie competition, remember that one? Good old N64 days. They've got 6 levels picked out for it. Mumbo's Mountain, Treasure Trove Cove, Clanker's Cavern, Bubblegloop Swamp, Gobi's Valley and Freezy Peak. For each level, you've got to collect 100 notes, 10 jigsaws and 2 honeycombs, and then finish it under their qualifying time. If you manage it, you can win £30 cash for each level. Qualifying times are things like 18 minutes for Mumbo's Mountain, up to 35 minutes for Bubblegloop Swamp, which sounds about right. That swamp was a bit of a pain. They're giving a little bit of advice for each level too, saying, Mumbo's Mountain is a doddle, Treasure Trove Cove is longer, Clanker's Cavern is slow because of all that swimming about, Bubblegloop Swamp is trickier with piranhas, Gobi's Valley needs a bit of planning, and Freezy Peak has those annoying snowmen. 30 quid was a decent wedge back then, eh? For being good at banjo. Good times. This page is all about a Banjo-Kazooie competition, right in the middle of N64 Magazine. They're calling it, I'm the best at Banjo-Kazooie. Blimey, remember Banjo-Kazooie? What a game that was. Fecky. Anyway, they've set up these challenges in Mad Monster Mansion, Rusty Bucket Bay, and Click Clock Wood. For each level, you need to grab 100 notes, 10 jigsaws, and 2 honeycombs, and then beat the qualifying time to win 50 quid cash. Mad Monster Mansion's time is 28 minutes, Rusty Bucket Bay is 35 minutes, and Click Clock Wood is 50 minutes. Rusty Bucket Bay, they're saying it's the hardest level, no kidding. Getting lost in that place was a nightmare, even without a time limit. Then they've got a total game time challenge for 100 quid. 5 hours 30 minutes is the qualifying time to complete the whole lot, which sounds like a right old slog. They're not wrong saying it's one of the hardest things they've set up. Sounds like a proper day's gaming to get that time down. There's a timetable bit saying entries for the next issue of the mag need to be in by the 30th of October, and they'll print the winners in issue 23, out in November. So you've got to be quick if you want to enter. Warranted. Down below there's a bit where you're supposed to write your name and address to send in your entry, and they've got all the level names listed again, like Mumbo's Mountain, Treasure Trove Cove, Clanker's Cavern, Bubblegloop Swamp, Gobi's Valley, Freezy Peak, Mad Monster Mansion, Rusty Bucket Bay, Click Clock Wood, and then total game time. You're supposed to send in photo proof, or a video or something from a Game Boy camera even, for each entry. Crikey, Game Boy camera. That takes me back. Fancy relying on that for proof. Still, good times. This page is all about becoming a top player at ISS 98, which was pretty much the football game to have on the N64 back then. Apparently they gave it a stonking 92% in the last issue, so it must have been alright. The article's got this big headline, How Warranty A2 Become an IS 98 Champion, and underneath it says, football doesn't get much better. But, just how good are you at IS 98? A bit cocky, aren't they? There's a couple of footy players looming over the text, looking all serious. Down below there's a screen grab of the handicap settings for a match between Russia and Kazakhstan. You can mess about with things like player condition, how many players each team has, and even how good the keepers are. Bit of a fiddle to get it just right. I remember spending ages tweaking these menus. Then there's a box titled Rules, which explains how to play these challenges they've set up. Basically your team's got to be on medium motivation. Not happy, not sad face apparently. Always 11 players, except for one challenge. and always with medium goalie ability, which is 3 out of 5. They reckon this is to stop you finding sneaky holes to cheat your way through. Cheeky sods, as if we would. Anyway, it looks like they're setting up some proper tests to see if you're really an IS-98 champion, or just a bit lucky. Sounds like a laugh, actually. This page is all about getting better at IS-98 on the N64, breaking down some of the essential skills you'll need to become a champion, or at least beat your mates. It's got sections for things like passing, shooting, and sliding tackles. All the basics, really. They even go through some of the fancier stuff, like chips, skills which they reckon is a bit showy but can fool people feints, and through balls, calling through balls the finest movement in the game, which is a bit strong, isn't it? Then it moves on to 1-2s, which are described as hard to pull off but brilliant when they work, fouls cheeky button combo for a sneaky push curl shots which they are calling banana shots, and crosses. For each skill, they give you a quick explanation and the button presses, alongside a little screenshot of the game in action. It's all pretty straightforward stuff really, but back then, we lapped this kind of thing up to get any edge we could in ISS. This page from N64 Magazine, issue 21 it seems, takes me right back. It's all about how to conquer some challenges in what looks like International Superstar Soccer 98, good old ISS. They've got 5 challenges laid out here, proper head scratchers back in the day some of these were. Challenge 1 is about completing all 16 scenarios. Sounds like a bit of a grind, but they reckon some are dead easy, like keeping Denmark's lead against Croatia, even with a man down. Others were a bit more hairy, like coming back from 30 down as Switzerland against Norway. And apparently the last scenario involving Jamaica and Mexico is some kind of life-affirming experience, according to them. A bit strong maybe. Challenge 2 is all about penalties, and they want you to win a shootout as Liberia against Germany on level 5 difficulty. Liberia, bless them, not exactly a footballing powerhouse in the game, and Germany are always solid. Tips are to keep your shots low and use that Z button to curl it. Tricky stuff for sure, balling powerhousing. Next up, challenge 3, free kicks with South Korea. 10 consecutive ones in training mode. They're saying free kicks are harder now, and the goalies are smarter. You gotta score direct, or have someone get a diving header on it. Sounds like a test of patience more than anything. Challenge 4 is beating Brazil on level 5 as well, but you've gotta use a 154 formation. Brazil on level 5 untouchable they reckon. They suggest loading up on defense in midfield and sitting deep. Basically, pray and hope for the best it sounds like. Finally, challenge 5, Battle of Britain. Play as England against Scotland with only 9 men and a 334 formation. Bit of a daft scenario that one, but it sounds like the idea is you're meant to get players sent off, play passing football, sit back, and try to nick a goal on the counter. Sounds like a typically tense England versus Scotland affair, even in pixel form. Difficulty ratings are given out, dot system, not exactly rocket science, but it did the job. Yeah, looking at this page takes me back to rainy afternoons trying to master these challenges and feeling chuffed when you finally cracked one. Simpler times, eh? This page is all about becoming an IS-98 champion, or so it reckons. It's laid out with a bunch of challenges to test your skills. Challenge 6 is about sliding tackles in IS-98, playing as Wales against Holland with this referee called Carlos. Apparently you're only allowed to slide tackle and no foot-in tackles. Sounds a bit risky in the box, eh? Difficulty is 2 dots, so not too bad. And orchestra. Then there's challenge 7, trying to win the World Cup as the USA in IS-98. They reckon the USA are a bit average, decent at the back but lacking up front, so you need to think about your tactics. This one's a bit harder, 4 dots on the difficulty. Challenge 8 is Luck of the Draw on level 5 difficulty. It's about randomly picking teams in IS-98. Apparently if you just keep pressing start you'll get random teams. They mention Germany is the default for both, and you might end up with a Holland versus Brazil game, which sounds tricky enough even without random teams. Difficulty is N-flav-A, whatever that means for random teams. UK. Challenge 9 is all about the through ball in IS-98. You have to win a match without using the through ball at all. They say through balls are key in IS-98, so this is about mixing up your game, using normal passes and chip passes instead. Sounds like a proper test of your skills. Difficulty is 3 dots. Finally, challenge 10 is about scoring direct from a corner in IS-98. Apparently, this new IS-98 has got added curl by holding Z to make it easier. They reckon keepers are good at dealing with high balls, so you need to be clever and use B for power or C left for accuracy. Difficulty is 3 dots, so not too easy. Looks like a decent set of challenges to get you up to scratch on IS-98 back in the day. This page then is from N64 Magazine, and it's got a how-to guide focusing on International Superstar Soccer '98, which back then was, pretty much the only decent footy game on the N64. There are 5 challenges laid out here. Challenge 11 is all about headers. Win a game scoring only headers. Tricky that, they reckon get it down the wings and cross it in. Difficulty rating is 3 dots, so mid-range I suppose. Boring. Next up is dribbling, challenge 12, score a goal dribbling from the halfway line as Cameroon. Cameroon weren't exactly Brazil back then, were they? Difficulty 4 dots, getting a bit harder. They mention using pacey wingers like Kimo and Angido, names I've completely forgotten to be honest. Challenge 13, the Great Escape, is a bit of a laugh. Play as Switzerland against Italy, go 30 down, and then come back to win. Switzerland against Italy, sounds about right for the time. Italy were always solid defensively. Difficulty rating is the full 5 dots. Seriously hard then. Use the wings, they suggest. Always the wings, eh? Challenge 14, goal blitz, score 6 or more goals past Germany on level 5 difficulty. Playing as Jamaica. Germany on level 5, blimey, that does sound tough. Jamaica, bit random but maybe good pace. 4 dots difficulty, they recommend playing through Klinsmann, little wonder with his stats they say. Germany on level. Finally, challenge 15 is long shot score from the center circle in training mode. They say it's surprisingly difficult, and to aim for your own goal, not the other end cheeky. 2 dots difficulty, surprisingly easy perhaps. Overall, it's a page of IS-78 challenges to keep you busy, back when we were all still figuring out the N64 controller, and if 3D football games were actually any good. Good times, sort of. This page from N64 Magazine, it's the Tips Extra section. Looks like they're dishing out some help for GoldenEye, F1 World Grand Prix, and F-Zero X. For GoldenEye, they're still going on about those hidden multiplayer characters. Apparently if you highlight the last character and put in some button presses, you can unlock some obscure lot like rare staff members dressed in tuxedos and a tiny tea lady. Sounds a bit daft to be honest, but back then, we lapped it up. F1 World Grand Prix has some code names to get gold and silver colored cars. You just have to rename old driver Williams to Pyrite or Chrome, easy peasy. And if you fancy racing in Hawaii, just rename him to Vacation. Sounds like a laugh, although probably not the most realistic Grand Prix setting. And lastly, F-Zero X, blimey that game was fast. There's a cheat code to unlock all 30 vehicles and all difficulty levels, handy if you're struggling. And something about squashed vehicles, if you hold down all sorts of buttons on the vehicle select screen, the cars go all super deformed, shorter and fatter apparently, for parallel parking. Right then. This page showcases readers' top 10 tips for the N64, a proper throwback to the late 90s. It's all about gamers sharing their secrets and cheats. Tip number 1 is for Forsaken, offering invincibility, which was a fairly cool but maybe slightly generic shooter at the time. Then there are tips for Mission. Impossible, yes, the one where Tom Cruise dangled from things. Snowboard Kids are kind of Mario Kart but on snowboards. Robotron 64, Banjo-Kazooie, Rampage World Tour, and even WCW vs NWO World Tour for the wrestling fans. Bit of a mixed bag really, but all decent N64 titles for their day. Next up, it's Reader's Deitel Codes. Deitel, that name takes me back. This is basically Game Shark codes for cheating. Again for GoldenEye, Forsaken, Super Mario 64, Wave Race 64, Lilat Wars, which was Star Fox 64 in the US if I recall Tetrasphere, and even Wave Race 64 again. Someone clearly wanted to mess about in Wave Race. Infinite everything seems to be the theme, as you'd expect from cheat codes. Right at the bottom it's asking for your own top tips, and if yours is good enough you could win a MacoPad controller and an N64 badge. Remember MacoPads? They were trying to be fancy, weren't they? And sending it in means actually cutting out the form and posting it, none of this email nonsense. Proper old school magazine stuff. This page from N64 Magazine, issue 21, it says, is the tips section, and it's all about Banjo-Kazooie. Remember Banjo-Kazooie? Massive game back then. They've got common questions like how to get to Rusty Bucket Bay and what spellbooks do. Everyone wanted to know that. The intro talks about November and how you can spell Nintendo. Very clever lads at N64 Magazine. Apparently Nintendo blew everyone away at the ECTS show, even poor old Sony. Games like F1 World Grand Prix, Turok 2, and Zelda 64 are mentioned as being upcoming. Zelda was the big one we were all hyped for. To get to Rusty Bucket Bay, it's a bit of a faff in Mad Monster Mansion, involving pumpkins, coffins, and a cemetery. Spellbooks are in 3 places: Bubble Gloop Swamp, Mad Monster Mansion again, and a room with a vase. Typical Banjo-Kazooie really. Bit complicated, but that was the style. This page from N64 Magazine, going back to November 1998 it seems, is all about the Nintendo hotline, remember that? Before the internet was really a thing for game help, you actually had to phone someone. They reckon they had expert games players on the other end of the line to help you out with your Nintendo woes. They were open 7 days a week, even Christmas Day apparently. Madness, Warrington. Anyway, there are a few Q&A bits here. Someone struggling with Gobi's Valley in Banjo-Kazooie, asking how to water the tree, and another one's stuck in Rusty Bucket Bay trying to get to the witch switch. Banjo-Kazooie was massive back then, everyone was playing it. There's also someone asking about beating the polar bear in the second sled race, and another about reaching areas in Freezy Peak after beating the game. It's all very Banjo-Kazooie focused, this page. Donkey. Then there's a section on Banjo-Kazooie cheats, just in case you were properly stuck. It lists a few of the cheat codes, like an energy bar to get you far for all honeycomb pieces, and Banjo begs for plenty of eggs, for infinite eggs. Remember those long cheat codes? You had to enter cheat first, then type out the phrase using letters on tiles. Took ages. There's a screenshot of that letter tile floor as well, classic. So yeah, mostly Banjo-Kazooie tips and cheats on this page, reminding you that if you were really stuck back in '98, you could always ring up the Nintendo hotline. Imagine that now. This page looks like the letters page from issue 21. Classic. Right then, we've got a letter kicking off moaning about the N64 and this new Dreamcast thing from Sega. They reckon it's a 128-bit threat and might give Nintendo a bit of a fright if it's only £200. Bit dramatic, weren't we all back then? Mention of F-Zero X and Zelda 64 being delayed again, no surprises there. Always waiting for Zelda. Kick in the pants is what they're calling it for Nintendo to sort themselves out. Then we have the correction corner. Seems they messed up the Banjo-Kazooie guide again. Typical. Something about notes in Gnorty's cave in Banjo-Kazooie and the Jinjos in Click Clock Wood being in the wrong place. Someone called Robert from Leicester couldn't find the notes, and Tim from London is confused about the Jinjos. Sorry, Ed, always the same. They also got Bruce Carrollgis's letter wrong in issue 19. Apparently goblins were invading page 126, not page 26. Oops. Few more letters. One about a different layout in Banjo-Kazooie's Freezy Peak intro, and another about Threaten Bottles threatening to delete your save in Banjo-Kazooie if you annoy him. Remember spending ages figuring out how to wind Bottles up? Good times. Warrington Noi. And at the top, Club 64 details, address in Bath, email address that looks ancient now, and the star letter prize is 3 GameStar joypads. Joypads were always welcome. All letters printed get a prized N64 badge. Nice. This page opens with a bit of a moan in the letters section. Someone called Joshua Bailey is having a pop, in a polite way, about game guides coming out too soon after reviews, especially for big games like Banjo-Kazooie. He reckons it spoils the fun of discovering things for yourself, which is fair enough. Ed, the editor, replies saying they try to balance hints and tips without giving everything away and mentions Zelda next, saying they'll try to hold back on a guide for that for a good while. There's a warning flash about a Banjo-Kazooie secret inside typical magazine stuff to get you to read on. Next, someone called Jamie Russell is asking if GT64 is a con, because the box says 12 tracks, but they can only find 6. Ed jokes about it being a bit of a con, but no one cares. Dr. Kit's Game Clinic answers readers' questions. Gavin Doughty from Preston is having trouble with WWF Warzone on the N64 and getting wrestlers breaking into fights in challenge mode. Dr. Kitts reckons he's accidentally hitting the backup codes printed in the manual. John Wells from Norwich is asking about Banjo-Kazooie secrets. He mentions seeing the 3 secrets at the end sequence island, door, and ice key, and wants to know how to get to them, complaining it's not fair if they are for Banjo-Tooie, and wants the secrets now. Dr. Kitts is a bit sarcastic, saying Mumbo Jumbo is telling the truth, and you have to wait for the sequel. He's joking about it being a mystery how Rare are going to handle it, maybe with memory carts or complex codes, and ends up saying to just wait. Then there's a quick reader comment about Romeo and Juliet, which is a bit random, and another one from Craig Silcox about how he's been studying GoldenEye and knows the guard patrol route on Surface 2 down to the steps. Bit obsessive that. Finally, in Dream On, Simon Gill and Jack Croft from Penrith have an idea for a flight sim game like GoldenEye but in the air, with training missions, different levels, and bombing runs. Ed thinks Pilot Wings was alright but could be better, and Aero Fighters Assault was a bit rubbish. Lawrence Jenkins from Hereford has an idea for an X-Men 64 game called Lost Powers, a 3D beat em-up, where you choose your X-Men like Rogue, Storm, Jubilee, Jean, Cyclops, Wolverine, Gambit, and Beast to fight Magneto and Juggernaut after the mansion gets attacked. Ed thinks it sounds good, a bit X-Men heavy for N64 maybe, and suggests surprising players more. Yeah, it's alright, just the usual reader game ideas section really. This page of N64 Magazine is the bonus letters and so tell me this section, classic stuff back then. In the letters page, some readers are chatting about their gaming experiences. One bloke called George from Bedford is asking about Paul's plant, which sounds like an ongoing gag. Then there's Simon from Comwich who's chuffed he broke the world record for Mario 64, proper dedication that, sending in a videotape and all. Another reader, Guy from Great Yarmouth, is asking about weird glitches in World Cup 98. Always something dodgy going on in footy games, especially back then. Someone else, Andrew from Great Yarmouth again, thinks the flight pads in Banjo-Kazooie look like cannabis leaves. Cheeky sod. And Rare just giggled about it apparently. Harry from Fleet wants to know how to get his letter published. Bit meta that. And R. Davies from Rockingham is confused about dates in issue 12. Finally, Lionel from London is asking about Andrea's age, and Ed, the editor, is being a bit of a tease as usual. Then there's a section called Read Norwegian, about a Norwegian developer called Innerloop, who apparently made Joint Strike Fighter, and are working on new action games, and Eidos is involved. Sounds a bit hush-hush, typical publisher vagueness on release dates. Hanayday. The So Tell Me This section is the questions bit. Someone called John Simons is asking about Zelda V-Rally and Top Gear Overdrive, and when they'll be out and how much. Typical N64 wishlist stuff. There's also questions about turn-based combat speed in Hybrid Heaven vs Final Fantasy V-2, Turtles licenses, and a Blades of Steel update. Proper retro shout out there. And someone from Ireland, Peter Kinsella, is wondering about Contra on the N64, or a Cybernator update, Tonsi. The answers are classic magazine banter. Zelda is still a while off, V-Rally looks good, Top Gear is cheaper, standard stuff. Hybrid Heaven combat is supposedly quicker. Konami still has the Turtles but no news there. Blades of Steel and Major A are mentioned but nothing concrete. Contra or Cybernator? No definite answers as usual, just maybe for Cybernator. Another question asks about the Silver Coin Challenge in DKR being made easier. Apparently testers thought it was too hard. Sensible move really. Someone called Arun Rao is asking about playing Poor Alpha in DKR for ages, and about Micro Machines 64 having 8-player mode using pad sharing, which sounds chaotic but fun. And finally, there's a question about doing the foot race with Cooper Quick in 0 feet 000. Sounds like cheating to me, but Ed just says loads of people have asked. The usual mix of game news, reader questions, and editors' witty replies then. Good times. This page of N64 Magazine, harking back to November 98 it seems, kicks off with the N64 board section, which is like their letters page. Someone called Colin Farr from Bromley is having a right old time with screen flickering using a passport for his American copy of Shadows of the Empire. Passports, eh? Remember those? Bit of a faff, but they let you play import games, which was quite the thing back then. They're suggesting it's the RF connector causing the issue, and advising to get a SCART lead. Fancy. Then there's another reader, John Rogers from Coventry, asking about a cylinder bomb thrower in GoldenEye 007. Turns out the magazine made it up. Bit of a blunder, but they admit they were playing GoldenEye far too much, probably fueled by too much sugary pop, and late nights to get the review done on time. Classic. They say sorry to anyone who wasted time looking for this non-existent weapon. Cheeky sods. Over on the right is the Video Meme Result section. They ran an anime competition, back in issue 17, where you could win videos of Neon Genesis Evangelion and Dirty Pair Flash. Evangelion was all the rage then, proper moody anime. Dirty Pair Flash, well that was a bit more fan-servicey, let's say. The winner of the cartoon strip competition was some bloke called Jukka Piera, from Helsinki in Finland. Apparently the story was a bit hard to follow, but they loved it, especially the middle panel and the tail, which is apparently a Finnish thing, right you are. There are runners-up too, Lee Maley, Rob Pierce, Gavin Emery and D. Wesco, and a bunch of people who were highly commended get a mention as well. Alex Smith, Michael Flaumer, Brian Hartzheim, Andrew Brimble, Valentin Kratka, and Alan Monaghan. Fair play to them all, must have been some cracking cartoons. This page is a right blast from the past. In it's the reader ads section from an old N64 mag. Looking at the games people are flogging and after, it's proper nostalgia fuel. Or in N64 mag. In the games for sale bit, there's folks shifting classics like Top Gear Rally and Super Mario 64. Someone's even selling a whole N64 bundle with GoldenEye, Lilac Wars, we called it Star Fox 64 back then. You know, Blast Corps, Banjo, Turok and a few others. Those were the days, eh? Lilac Wars and Mario, both for 35 quid each, a decent price at the time I reckon. There's also some Japanese games, like Blastozer, Star Fox, Yoshi's Story, Gomon and N64 Sumo being touted, and someone's getting rid of SNES games too, like F-Zero, FIFA 98, and even Super International Cricket, remember that one? Shiki. Then there's the pen pal section, people looking for mates to write to, all about N64s and games and stuff. One fella, Matthew, likes GoldenEye 007, proper classic, 14 years old, and wants a pen pal from abroad. Another one, Ian, is into N64s and movies and music, wants a pen pal around 13 or 14 years old. Laura likes Liverpool and Michael Owen, and also wants pen pals. It's quite sweet really, seeing how people connected back then before all this internet malarkey took over. And at the bottom there's an advert form for us readers to fill in, proper old school. You could put in your details and tick what section you wanted your ad to go in. Games for sale, wanted, pen pals, all that. You had to write in block capitals, and stick to the word limit. There's even a rules bit warning about pirate software, which was a big no-no back then, and to be polite, and not to be cheeky to the teacher, which is always good advice, and you had to sign it to say you read the rules. Proper retro, this page is. This page here, from N64 Magazine back in the day, is having a bit of a chuckle about some of the odd things you see in video games. It's called Jest Things, and it's looking at the 10 strangest things in video games. James Price is the bloke who's written it. The first thing they're on about is the small blow finish in fighting games. Remember this? You'd be hammering away at some geezer like Beelzebub himself in a fighting game. Proper going at it, and then suddenly, a tiny little tap like a paper cut, and they're down. Lights out, all that build-up and drama for a pathetic little love tap to finish them off. Warrington J. They're using Mortal Kombat as an example, which, yeah, fair enough, I remember that. They've got a screenshot of Mortal Kombat 4, with Tanya and Reiko, and another one with Al Rashid getting a bit of a pasting. One caption says, "A little tap's all that's needed in any Mortal Kombat." Spot on, really. Then there's another saying, "Al Rashid's in trouble. A light slap around the face will finish him." Bit sarcastic, I like it. Cheshire. They're wondering if it's a good thing or a bad thing, this small blow finish. They reckon it's just a bit of a flaw in the energy bar system, but maybe it's also a sneaky way to finish someone off. They mention the Mortal Kombat fatalities, which are proper over the top, and contrast that with these weak finishes. Good point, actually. Makes you think. This page from N64 Magazine, titled N64 Investigates, it's having a bit of a ponder about some of the usual things you see in games, isn't it? First off, they're on about small cars, big cars, slow cars, fast cars. You know, in your racing games. They've got Mario Kart 64 pictured there, classic stuff. Remember choosing your character based on if they were quick or handled well, that sort of thing. The magazine is wondering why games do this, make some cars handle like boats, and others like rockets. They reckon it's a bit old-fashioned, maybe from the arcade days, but are questioning if it's really needed on the N64. They even point out Donkey Kong is supposed to be fast but slow to get going, which, yeah, makes sense considering he's a big lad. Gastu. Then there's the disappearing corpse, bit grim, isn't it? Talking about when you beat someone up in a game like Mortal Kombat or something and their body just vanishes. They're saying it's all down to the console not being able to handle too much on screen at once. Fair enough, I suppose. But they ask if it's a good or bad thing. Reckon maybe keeping the bodies around could be helpful, like breadcrumbs in GoldenEye or Quake. Show you where you've already been. Shadows of the Empire gets a mention too. Apparently they keep the bodies in that. Bit morbid for a kid's console, perhaps. Lastly, they're on about the winning pose, the kind of thing Street Fighter 2 started. Every fighting game's got it, someone wins and they have to strike some daft pose. They reckon it's a bit much, a bit over the top, especially when they throw in some cheesy voice clip too. They're wondering if it's a bit too American, and maybe players should get to choose their own celebration, like being unimpressed, or even mocking their opponent. Bit harsh, but funny idea. Sounds like they're just being picky, to be honest, but it's a laugh, isn't it? This page of N64 Magazine, right? It's having a bit of a ponder about strange things in video games, isn't it? Number 5 kicks off moaning about sequels, but in a good way. They're saying how back in the day, licensed games were all the rage, you know, tie-ins with films and that sort of thing, and they use brands like Mario, ISS, Lara Croft, even Quake to sell stuff. But they reckon sequels actually got better on the N64, like Turok 2 being a step up. They mention how tech has moved on, like comparing Donkey Kong Country on the SNES to what they could do now, and GoldenEye as a proper example. They're wondering if it's just a tech thing that makes sequels better, and then give a nod to Perfect Dark, saying it's a good thing sequels improve. Sounds about right, doesn't it, Taka? Then number 6 is about fighting games, and the classic block move. They're on about how daft it is when a massive punch gets blocked by just a little arm. like it defies physics and all sorts. They mention fighters starting to use countermoves instead of just blocking everything, getting a bit more realistic, or at least trying to. There's a screenshot from what looks like Fighters Destiny 2, with blokes called Abdul and Leon having a scrap. They're saying blocking is just part of the game, neither good nor bad, but then they have a bit of a laugh about a schoolgirl blocking a sumo wrestler punch. Bit silly really, but fighting games can be a bit silly, can't they? Thor. Finally, number 7 is having a go at lens flare in racing games. You know, when you go over a hill and get all those colourful lights, they ask if it's even realistic, and basically decide it's just programmers showing off a bit too much. They've got a picture from F-Zero X showing it. They think it's an overused trick and reckon these programmers need to get out in the sun more to see what real lens flare is like. Bit harsh maybe, but lens flare can be a bit much sometimes, can't it? They end up saying it's just boring. Ouch. This page from N64 Magazine investigates a few gaming notions, starting with size doesn't matter. They're on about how in video games, like in real life, the little guy can often beat the big fella. Think Mario and Bowser. Classic example, isn't it? They reckon it's quite satisfying to take down a massive boss. Gives you a good feeling apparently. Doric. Next up, under number 9, it's golf games. They're wondering if N64 golf games can truly simulate the sport. I remember back then there were a few like YLA Country Club, and they were alright for what they were, just pressing a button to swing basically. The article seems to be asking if these games are a bit simple, especially compared to proper golf. They reckon the N64's analog stick should be capable of making a decent golf game, and question if golf games are a bit rubbish or not. Finally, number 10 is about game difficulty. Games become more difficult the further you get, profound stuff, but they're saying some developers don't quite get the balance right. They bring up Mario 64, saying even the hardest tracks are doable, then contrast it with GT64, which I guess is Gran Turismo 64, suggesting it might be a bit much. GoldenEye gets a mention too, specifically the cradle level, which was a pain in the backside no doubt. And they also throw in Click Clock Wood from Banjo-Kazooie as being a tough area. The point is, they think games should reward you more for getting through the harder bits. Fair enough, I suppose. This page is plugging the next issue of N64 Magazine, issue 22 it says down there at the bottom. And what have we got here? V-Rally 98 Championship Edition is the big thing apparently. World exclusive review of the N64's best driving game to date, they're claiming, aren't they always? But yeah, V-Rally was a decent racer back then, especially on the consoles. They're promising to show you all the secret bits, cars and tracks in issue 22. And if you're an N64 owner, apparently it's a must. A bit strong, but that's marketing for you. Plus, they're banging on about a staggering £10,000 worth of prizes to be won. It's the most amazing N64 competition yet, they reckon. You could find out all about it in the December issue, which was on sale Friday the 30th of October. So issue 22 is the one to look out for if you were into V-Rally on the N64 and wanted to see what they thought of it and maybe win a few quid back in the day. It's also stating at the bottom in big letters that N64 Magazine is the UK's best-selling. Well, they would say that, wouldn't they? This page from issue 22 of N64 Magazine seems to be hyping up what's inside. It's shouting about having 132 pages, which back then felt like a massive amount for a magazine about games. They're saying all you need for your N64, which is a bit strong, but hey, magazine's gotta sell, right? What? Looking at the game reviews, they've got F-Zero X, the UK version, Body Harvest, and NFL Blitz. F-Zero X was properly fast, a real showcase for the N64, and Body Harvest was that weird sci-fi action game from DMA Design, who later became Rockstar North, the Grand Theft Auto lot. Blitz was the big American football game on the N64, very arcade-y, lots of big hits. Then there's New Shots, for Perfect Dark and Jet Force Gemini, both rare games. Perfect Dark, everyone was hoping it would be the next GoldenEye, and Jet Force Gemini was their sci-fi shooter. They also mentioned Top Gear Overdrive, which I think was trying to be a bit more serious racing than Mario Kart, but probably didn't set the world alight. They're teasing more on Perfect Dark, and more shots of Jet Force Gemini, and this time, hopefully, Top Gear Overdrive, which is a bit sarcastic even from them, suggesting they've been promising it for a while. Tipped section is asking about Glover and Turok and F-Zero. Glover was that odd platformer with the glove character, Turok was dinosaurs and shooting, and F-Zero, well, we already saw that reviewed, so maybe they're giving tips for it. They're promising best games advice, which is what you want from a magazine. They're giving away a double game guide, which sounds like it's got guides for Forsaken and Mystical Ninja. Forsaken was that 3D shooter where you flew around, and Mystical Ninja was the proper quirky Konami action-adventure game. Always a bit of fun. 2 brand new guides for 2 brand new, Top-notch N64 games is what they reckon. And then there's a free gift that's apparently so bad it's funny and they're saying it's ground the office to a halt. The clue is, you could use it in the kitchen. Sounds like a right load of rubbish, but back then you'd take anything free you could get with a magazine. On sale Friday, the 30th of October 9 a.m. sharp. Be there. Very dramatic. November 1998, that was a good time for the N64. Lots of games coming out as we headed towards Christmas. Yeah, typical magazine cover page, trying to get you hyped for what's inside. This page then is from an old issue of N64 Magazine. Can tell it's issue 21 from the index at the side there and bottom corner. Looks like they are running a quiz. 10 questions, 50 quid prize. Not bad for back then. Questions seem to be about games featured in the magazine itself. First question is about rare games. Wonder if it's GoldenEye or Banjo. Probably both. Then there's one about lowest scoring game and favourite weapon in Turok 2. That game was pretty gory for its time, wasn't it? Howard Lincoln also gets a mention. He was a Nintendo bigwig. And Glover, remember that one with the ball types? Yeah. To the right of the quiz there's an index of what's inside the mag. 1080 Snowboarding Review, that was a launch title, wasn't it? Still looked good, mind you. Banjo-Kazooie is in there. Are you the best at banjo? Bet a lot of people thought they were. Body Harvest, Bomberman Hero, Chameleon Twist 2, Duke Nukem, 0 Hour Preview, Gex, Enter the Gecko, Glover Review, Jet Force Gemini Future Look, Lego Racers Preview, Nightmare Creatures Preview, Perfect Dark Future Look, Rayman 2 Preview, Revolt Preview, Rogue Squadron Future Look, Shadowman Preview, Turok 2 Review, V-Rally 98 Special Investigation, Wild Metal Country Preview, Zelda 64 Special. Blimey, quite a lot there in it. Looks like a good issue actually. Lots of previews of upcoming games like Perfect Dark and Zelda 64. Everyone was hyped for those. And reviews for games that were out then like Glover and Turok 2. Good times for the N64 back then. Lots of games coming out. Lots of games coming out. There are a couple of small pictures, one of a weapon from Turok, and another of that weird mummy fella from Glover standing on some platforms. Down at the bottom it tells you how to enter the quiz and rules and all that. Closing date was November 15th, 1998, so a bit late now then. Issue was on sale in early October, next one end of October. Yeah, good blast from the past this page. This page is a proper blast from the past, isn't it? We're looking at a full page spread for Buck Bumble, remember that one? Pesticidal Maniac it's called. Coming soon for the N64. It's got this big, cartoony bug with a gun. Looks like a bit of a laugh actually, in a daft sort of way. They've given it a full page, so someone in the magazine thought it was going to be the next big thing, bless them. Then down the right side we've got the reviews for this issue, dated 21st of November 1998. Loads of games being looked at. There's Turok 2. Must have been the big hitter that month. Everyone was hyped for that dinosaur hunter. Gex 64. Enter the Gecko is in there too. That wisecracking gecko, yeah, I remember that. Glover, Bomberman Hero, Wyally Country Club, 1080 Degree Snowboarding, Trump World. Blimey, what a mix. They've even got Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time listed, probably still raving about that 1 month after release. Below that they've got an other great stuff section with Perfect Dark Future Look and Jet Force Gemini Future Look, getting the hype going for those rare games that were just around the corner. V-Rally 64 Special Investigation sounds like they really dug deep on that one, and there's something about Banjo and winning hard cash. Must have been a competition. Nintendo Europe Investigated. Sounds a bit serious, doesn't it? Right at the bottom they've got a little look out section, plugging more great N64 games over 50 pages. They've got screenshots of Duke Nukem, 0 Hour, Nightmare Creatures, Revolt, Rayman 2, and Body Harvest. Page numbers there too, if you were bothered to look them up. So yeah, a typical N64 magazine page from back in the day, packed with previews, reviews, and trying to get us excited about all the latest games. Good times.